Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Naruto Kage level Chunin exams. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. Minato and his wife Kushina both laid dying on both sides of their newborn son. Minato laid on the right as he repeatedly apologized for what he had just done to his beloved new son. Mere minutes ago the Kyuubi had broken out of his wife's seal and wreaked havoc on the village hidden in the leaves. A masked man had broken the seal and he used the Kyuubi to attack the village, killing hundreds in the process. As the Hokage of the village, it had been up to him to stop the masked man and stop the king of the Biju. Minato had managed to foil the masked man's plans, but the Kyuubi had been too strong for him to kill. So he had been forced to split the Kyuubi in half and sealed one half into himself, and the other into his new son. It's only been a few hours and I suck at being a dad. Minato commented weakly as he stroked his son's hair, so much like his own, and wept openly. Kushina was weeping as well. Her baby boy had just become the third Jinchuriki to the Kyuubi no Yoko. She wept for the pain and suffering her new son was going to have to endure because of the accursed demon that was sealed in his stomach just like it had been in hers. She cried because she knew what it was like to be glared at and hated by everyone because of something she didn't want. But she had Minato. She found love to fill the hole that had been in her heart. Her son would have nothing. He would be all alone in the world. He would have no one to fill that hole in his heart. In a way she was angry with her husband, angry that he couldn't have found a better way, a way where her little Naru-chan wouldn't be so alone, but she knew that Minato didn't want this any more than she did. "I'm so sorry Naru-chan that we won't get to see you grow up," she sobbed heavily, spitting up blood as she did so. She looked at Minato. "Min-kun, what have we done? He's going to so alone. There won't be anyone to protect our little Naruto." She cried and sobbed. Not once in her entire life had she been this upset. Not even when she found out she was going to have the Kyuubi sealed inside her, and she couldn't believe she was this upset on the day that was supposed to be the best day of her life. Minato looked crestfallen as he stroked his son's hair, then a spark of what could only be hope ignited in his eye. "We may not be able to protect him. But maybe we can help him protect himself," he said as he shakily began to draw on Naruto's new seal with his life's blood. What do you mean?" Kushina asked hopefully. She'd give anything to make sure her new son was even slightly safer. Minato shakily drew on Naruto's stomach as he began to explain, "We may not be here to protect Naruto, but maybe we can give him the skills to protect himself. The seal I'm drawing will infuse our experiences and talents into Naruto so he can protect himself," Minato explained as he altered the seal on Naruto's stomach. Kushina's brow furrowed in confusion. "So our son will have our memories?" she asked confusedly, thinking that couldn't be healthy. Minato chuckled weakly. "No, he won't have our memories, but he'll have our experience in battles. He'll have the instincts of two veteran shinobi. He'll fight like we do because of what he will think is instincts, but it will be our experiences that make him have those instincts. He'll be incredibly talented in most ninja art because he'll unknowingly will have years of experience in the fields," Minato explained further as he began to finish up the seal. Kushina smiled weakly at her husband. Leave it to Minato to do the seemingly impossible to protect the people he cares about. She was also slightly happy that they could give their son even a small amount of protection from the cruel, hard, mean world. Kushina nodded as she grabbed Minato's hand and placed a hand on her son's head. "Naruto, don't be picky and grow strong. Make sure you bathe every day and stay warm. Also don't stay up late. You need lots of sleep, and make friends. You don't need a lot of friends. Just a few. Ones that you can really trust. I wasn't very good at it, but keep up with your studies and practice your ninjutsu hard. Remember, everyone has strengths and weaknesses, so don't get too depressed if you can't do something well. Respect your teachers at the academy. Oh, and this is important. It's about the 3 prohibitions for a shinobi. Be extra careful about lending and borrowing money. Put your mission wages into a savings account. No alcohol until you're 20. Too much can ruin your health, so drink in moderation. Another prohibition is women. I'm a woman, so I don't know too much about this, but all you need to remember is that this world is made up of men and women. It's only natural to take an interest in girls, but don't get hooked on bad women. Find someone like me." Speaking of the tree prohibitions, be wary of Jiraiya-sensei, you know. "Naruto, from now on, you're going to face lots of pain and hardship. Be true to yourself. Have a dream and have confidence to make that dream come true. There's so much. Oh, there's so much more I want to pass on to you. I wish I could stay with you longer. I love you. She finished, coughing blood as she did so. She smiled apologetically at her husband. Minato, I'm sorry I used up your time. Minato just shook his head and sent her a loving smile. Oh, it's okay. He looked at Naruto. Naruto, my message to you is, I guess the same as your nagging mother's. He said with a smile and received a chuckle from his wife. Kushina started to tear up again. Oh, I want to see him grow up so bad. She cried. Minato sent her a knowing smile. We will. I'm going to seal the last of our chakra in the seal as well so we can see Naruto again someday. Kushina smiled at her husband and nodded that she was ready. Both parents turned to the child between them and said, We love you, Naruto. Before the seal activated and took both their lives. Time skipped Naruto age 6. Naruto stood in the clearing at the academy like everyone else in his class. Today was their first day of taijutsu sparring with one another and Naruto knew he wasn't going to do well. The academy teachers had been sabotaging his education from the beginning. They told him how to throw a kunai wrong, told him the wrong stances in taijutsu, told him how to form hansais wrong, placed genjutsus on his test. They were doing everything that they could to make sure he never became a ninja. If it wasn't for his strange instincts, he had no idea how screwed he would be. When they taught him how to throw a kunai wrong, he couldn't explain it but he just knew it wasn't right. It was like his body was telling him that he wasn't doing it right. So Naruto altered his stance and grip until it felt natural and when he threw the kunai, he got a dead center. After that he just ignored everything the teachers tried to teach him. He wasn't even close to being an idiot. He knew that they were going to do everything in their power to screw him over so Naruto simply just ignored their teachings. Like the kunai incident, he made hansais until they felt right, and with the test he dispelled the genjutsus on them and answered the questions easily. He had gone under a henge and went into the library and tried to find scrolls on taijutsu styles but his taijutsu, however, he had not been able to fix. All the scrolls that deal with fighting stances other than the academy style were under lock and key in the genin and higher sections in the library. The only way to get into those sections was to be the rank of ninja of the section you were trying to enter. So Naruto had no style other than the bit and pieces of the academy style that he watched from the kids who were taught the correct forms. Naruto sighed as he scratched his sun-kissed hair. I'm so screwed. Maybe I'll get lucky and end up with a girl. Maybe then I can just overpower her. Naruto thought strategically. Admittedly it wasn't an advanced but for a 6-year-old. Naruto was broken out of his musings by Iruka starting the first match between Shikamaru Naru and Choji Akamichi. But sensei, I don't want to fight my friend. Choji complained. He was a rather gentle soul and he hated the thought of harming anyone, much less a friend. Iruka sighed as he explained the purpose of the spar, but you're not really fighting your friend Choji. You're helping him get stronger. Remember that even the Hokages spar with their friends to get. Iruka's speech was interrupted by Shikamaru walking out the white circle that was the ring. Don't worry Choji, I know this isn't your kind of thing. The Nara said lazily. Iruka sighed loudly as Choji grinned at his friend. Thanks Shikamaru. Goo, they're both so spineless. Ino commented and a young-looking Sakura glanced at her friend. You know them? She asked and Ino nodded sadly. Yeah. Our parents know each other. Man, Shikamaru will never make it to Chunin. He's too lazy. Kiba commented, feeling slightly annoyed that he was robbed of seeing a good fight. I don't know Inuzuka-san. Life is very long. Shino commented and Kiba's sweat dropped at Shino's logical tone. Iruka looked at his two unwilling fighters. Fine. But do the harmony symbol. Shikamaru looked surprised. Oh. I almost forgot. He said as he walked back and linked fingers with his friend. Good, now Sasuke Uchiha. Iruka said calling out the next contestants. As Sasuke walked into the ring, his fangirls screamed their support. Sasuke was the most popular due to his Uchiha status and the fact he was doing the best in class. Dot and Naruto Uzumaki. The cheering stopped as everyone glared at the blonde and began to whisper insults about him. But they were loud enough that Naruto's sensitive ears caught what they were saying. Why is he even trying? He's not going to win. That's the boy my mommy told me to safety away from. What a freak. He should just give up. He's a monster. Naruto clenched his fists as he entered the ring. How desperately he wanted to prove them all wrong, but he knew he was no match for the Uchiha. "You ready to lose, Dobi?" Sasuke said arrogantly as he got in the interceptor fist stance, his family's taijutsu style. Naruto just sighed as he angled his body away from Sasuke. He didn't have any taijutsu style, so he didn't have a stance. Iruka looked at both contestants. "Begin," he yelled. Sasuke and Naruto sprung at each other. Sasuke threw the first punch, aiming for a one-hit KO so he could brag, but the strangest thing happened. Naruto, by instinct, grabbed Sasuke's wrist and used his momentum to throw him over Naruto's shoulder. Sasuke landed on his feet, but he looked as surprised as Naruto felt. He had no idea how he just did that. It was like his body knew how to dodge, so his mind wasn't needed. Is it like with the kunai and hand size? He thought hopefully, maybe there was a chance he could win after all. Naruto crouched low and sprung at Sasuke. He was snapped out of his surprise when Naruto's fist hit him in the gut. Ignoring the pain in his stomach, he threw a left hook to hit Naruto in the jaw, but the blow was stopped when Naruto threw up his forearm and caught Sasuke's arm by the elbow. Acting on instinct alone, he punched Sasuke in the mouth like he was going to do to him, and as Sasuke stumbled back, he then delivered a frontal kick to Sasuke's stomach and knocked him out of the ring. Everyone watched in shock as Naruto managed to beat Sasuke. He looked like he was doing it with ease. Iruka smiled lightly. It seems Naruto had been practicing on his own. "Winner, Uzumaki Naruto," he called out, pride evident in his voice. Naruto smiled, indescribably happy that he had just won. He couldn't believe it. Maybe now everyone would. "Cheater!" Sasuke's fangirls roared. They hurled other insults at him, and each one was worse than the last. They looked absolutely murderous. They refused to believe that Naruto had beaten their Sasuke-kun. Naruto looked at them in a sad way. "I should have known that they wouldn't cheer for me," he thought sadly as he took off running towards the fence and hopping over it, crying a little as he did so. Sasuke's eyes followed the blonde that had just bested him. He couldn't believe he had lost to the Dobi, and he was going to make sure he paid for embarrassing him like this. Naruto sat upon the Yondaime's stonehead for hours after the matches at the academy. This was his favorite place to come when he was upset by something the village had done to him. Naruto didn't know why they hated him so. They called him a demon and a monster. They said he killed their families and that he deserved the beatings, getting thrown out of stores and the cruel glares. He didn't know why they did those things. He certainly didn't think he was a monster, but that didn't matter. The entire village hated him except for his Jiji and Iruka sensei. Jiji was the Hokage of the village that looked after Naruto as much as he could. He was like the grandfather that he never had. Iruka sensei was the Oni teacher that didn't try to sabotage Naruto's future, but because how the academy was laid out, he only had his class once a week until his final year in the academy. They were the only ones who could stand to be around him. He asked them why they hated him, why they called him a demon, but they always dodged the questions. Naruto gazed down at the village below him in sad anger. Why couldn't they see that he wasn't a monster? That he never did those things that they accused him of? Why couldn't they see that he was just a normal 6-year-old boy? Naruto sighed as he thought about his match with Sasuke earlier. He thought since he had won, people would start to respect him a little. Maybe even want to be friends with him or include him in the occasional game. In hindsight, he realized he was a fool. He should have known that he would never gain the respect of his peers. And now everyone was going to hate him more because he had hurt the stupid Teme. It had been quite the shock when he had won, and he still didn't understand how he did it. His body just knew how to react before his gifted mind had a chance to process what was happening. Naruto was incredibly smart, not quite on par with Inara, but he was close, and for the life of him he couldn't figure out how his body knew what to do. He thought about telling Jiji about his odd instincts, but he had decided against it. What if that was the final straw with the Hokage and he would start to look at Naruto with those cruel, harsh, hateful eyes? Naruto didn't think he could stand it if Jiji looked at him that way. Naruto brushed away a tear that was beginning to form in his eye. "I won't cry. I'm not some crybaby," Naruto vowed as he continuously wiped away the tears that were escaping from his eyes despite his vow. He didn't show it, but Naruto was really lonely. He joked around and pranked to hide it, but deep down, Naruto all alone. He had Jiji and Iruka sensei, but he was terrified that he would mess up and they would end up hating him too, so he couldn't really rely on them. He just wanted one person that he could trust fully and didn't have to fear the cold sting of rejection from them. So, despite all of his attempts and vows, Naruto cried on top of his idol's head. Hey brat. Flashback 6 hours ago. Hinata watched Naruto jump over the academy fencing with a worried expression. Naruto had looked really upset that everyone accused him of cheating. Are you alright, Sasuke-kun? Did that cheater hurt you? Sakura asked her crush worriedly as she went to go pick him off the ground. Sasuke slapped her hand away. I'm fine, he said gruffly. Sasuke's mind was reeling. How did he lose to the Dobi? The loser of their class? He just knew he was going to get an earful from his father when he got home. Sakura looked hurt but complied with his wishes as Sasuke picked himself up. Iruka sighed as he watched Naruto's retreating form. He was worried about Naruto. He looked incredibly hurt that everyone had accused him of cheating when it was blatantly obvious Naruto had won with his own skill. Naruto's moves had really surprised Iruka. They certainly weren't academy style. He was going to ask Naruto where he learned them, but he had run off before he had a chance to. Iruka looked disappointedly at the rest of his students, who were still trash-talking Naruto, and made the hand size for his signature jutsu. Shut up, next contestant, he yelled, using his big head jutsu. After school, Hinata went looking for Naruto. She wanted to comfort the blonde and tell him that she didn't think he cheated. But she knew she would just stutter and faint. But she wanted to try and help Naruto. Naruto didn't know it, but he played a major role in the young Hyuga's life. Hinata idolized Naruto. He was everything she wished she could be. Confident, happy, endurance, the list went on. She'd give anything for her idol to notice her, but sadly he never did. She was the opposite of Naruto. Shy, sad, wrecked with self-doubt, and she would always cry if she did something wrong. Hinata walked up the stairs to the top of the Hokage monument, Naruto's usual hideout when he was sad or upset. Also unknown to our favorite blonde, Hinata would occasionally follow Naruto. Some part of the reason why was she wanted to know how he managed to endure everyone's hateful glares, and the other part was she enjoyed being near Naruto. He had a soothing presence that instantly calmed her down when she was upset. Like she thought she would, Hinata saw Naruto sitting upon the Yondaime's head. She watched him, trying to gather up the nerve to walk up and talk to him. Then minutes turned to hours as she tried to make her body move. Then she saw a sight she'd never thought she'd see. Naruto was crying. It broke Hinata's heart to see her hero so hurt to the point of tears. I have to move. Naruto-kun needs me, she thought to herself, and the moment she took a few steps in his direction, two men suddenly appeared. Back to Naruto. Naruto turned around slowly and saw that it was two Chunin ninja that had been talking to him. Yeah? He asked as he wiped away any leftover tears. The Chunin on the left asked, well, today we heard that you had managed to beat up Sasuke Uchiha in a spar today. Is that true? He asked. Naruto hesitated, then nodded. For some reason this guy was giving him the creeps. The two Chunin sent each other a sly smile. In that case we need you to come with us. The one on the right said with a disarming smile, but it had the exact opposite effect on Naruto. He had seen that kind of smile before, and it always ended in him getting hurt. Naruto got up slowly, giving them the impression that he was complying before he sprung into action. He leapt forward and punched the one on the right in the balls and grabbed a kunai from his holster before throwing it at the second Chunin before turning to run away. Oh no, you don't, you demon. The uninjured Chunin said as he grabbed Naruto by the hair and yanked him back. Naruto yelled out in pain as he hit the ground. The Chunin looked over at his friend, who was holding his private region and glaring at Naruto with a pained expression. You alright? He asked as he heavily rested his foot on Naruto's chest. Yeah, I'll be fine. I'll be even better when I make him pay for it later 10 times over. The injured Chunin responded as he delivered a swift kick to Naruto's ribs. Alright, let's get out. Leave Naruto-kun alone, Hinata yelled out as she got into her gentle fist stance. She was scared of the two Chunin, but she had to be brave to save Naruto. Naruto looked over and saw it was the weird girl in his class that fainted a lot. He gritted his teeth in pain as the Chunin dug his heel deeper into his ribs. What are you doing? Get outta here. I'll be fine, he called out to the pale-eyed heiress. The two Chunin shared a sly grin. Ah, is the little Hyuga gonna save the little monster? The injured one mocked. Hinata stood her ground, Ignoring their taunts and Naruto's pleas for her to run, she had to save Naruto. No matter the cost. The Chunin looked back at Hinata and grinned again as he delivered a devastating backhand to Hinata, causing her to go flying. Hinata landed on her head, causing her to heavily bleed, then crumpled into a beat-up ball. Her face hurt where she was slapped and her head really hurt where it was split open, but Naruto-kun was in danger. Hinata struggled to force herself back on 2 legs. The Chunin that had hit her sneered as he kicked her legs out from underneath her. "Just stay down, you Hyuga brat. You won't win," he said as he delivered a kick to her ribs. Hinata cried out in pain as Naruto struggled to get from underneath the boot that pinned him. "Don't hurt her, you son of a bitch," he screamed. The Chunins rolled their eyes as the Chunin that had been hurting Hinata picked her up and looked her in the eyes. Hinata looked fearfully as into the mont's cold onyx eyes before they turned red with 3 small tomos. If Hinata wasn't barely conscious, she would have been surprised that members of the Uchiha clan were hurting her and Naruto. "What are you doing? Now she'll know who we are," the Chunin standing on Naruto said in an annoyed tone. His partner didn't think that through. "Shut up, I know what I'm doing," he snapped. He looked deeply into Hinata's eyes. "You won't tell anyone about what happened here. You'll tell your family that you fell down the stairs to explain how you got hurt. If you tell anyone, I'll kill you," he threatened. Hinata looked terrified, but the Chunin ignored that as the tomos in his eye began to spin. "Now, sleep," he commanded, and Hinata drifted into unconsciousness. He tossed Hinata aside like yesterday's trash and turned to his friend. "Now, let's have some fun with the demon for shaming our family," he said as they both sunshined outside the village. Hours later with Hinata. Hinata woke hours later. She was all alone in the night's darkness. Dried blood from her head wound covered a third of her face and her ribs really hurt, but she forced herself on 2 legs. She had to help Naruto-kun. Sure, the Uchiha's threat terrified her to the point where words failed her, but the Hokage always said that you have to be willing to sacrifice for the ones you care about. That was the will of fire, the ideal that made Konoha great. Even though she was incredibly young, thought she understood the ideal. When her family would call her trash and make fun of her, she would just cry about it. But now that Naruto was in danger, she had the strength to do what she thought was right. And she knew saving Naruto was the right thing to do, even though it could cost her life before she had a chance to live it. Hinata knew she stood no chance against the 2 Uchihas, so she went for help to the only person that would care if Naruto was hurt. She ran as fast as she could to the Hokage's tower. With Naruto screamed soundlessly. He had lost the ability to scream in pain hours ago, his throat raw from constantly screaming as the 2 unnamed Uchihas tortured him to the edge of human endurance. He should have died hours ago, but his ability to heal had prevented him from embracing death. He cursed his ability, he just wanted the pain to end. He didn't care if it was because someone saved him or he died. "You had enough yet?" one of the Uchiha asked in a sadistic tone. Naruto nodded his head yes, desperate for the pain to end. The same Chunin grinned at Naruto in sadistic glee, as he pulled a knife from a sheath. Naruto peeked open an eye and saw it was a skinning knife. Clawed dread filled Naruto. "Please, someone, anyone, help me." With Hinata barged through the Hokage's door, completely ignoring the receptionist, Hokage-sama. She yelled as she barged into the room. "Hinata?" Hiyashi, Hinata's father, asked in confusion. Hinata stopped and looked at her father in surprise. Then she noticed that the Hokage's office was filled with clan heads and the civilian council. Feeling slightly embarrassed, she tried to sink into herself before she remembered that Naruto-kun needed help. "Hokage-sama, someone kidnapped Naruto-kun," she shouted out desperately, hoping that the Hokage would do something. Hiruzen Sarutobi froze for a moment. "What happened, child?" the god of shinobi asked in a reassuring tone. The girls looked like she was on the verge of passing out. Hinata began to tell him, and the councils, what happened. Hiyashi was impressed with his daughter. Not only did she try to take on 2 Chunin, but she didn't stutter once during the urgent story. As she finished, Hiruzen stood, dog, weasel, on command. The 2 Anbu captions reveled themselves in the center of the room. Gather your teams and any other Anbu or ninja you can find and find Naruto at any costs. The 2 Anbu nodded before disappearing. Hiruzen then turned to Fugaku Uchiha, the clan head. "I will asking you this once, Fugaku. If you lie to me about this I will ruin you and your clan. Did you order the kidnapping of Uzumaki Naruto? He asked in a bone-chilling tone. Fugaku met the Hokage's glare with one of his own. How dare this man threaten him? He was the head of the Uchiha clan. The most prominent clan there is, and he deserved respect. No, I knew of my son's loss to Naruto, but I have punished my son accordingly. I gave no order to harm Naruto. It is unlikely that it was even members of my clan. The girl must be mistaken or lying. He responded in a cold tone. Struggled saying that monster's name. It was because of that demon that his clan wasn't getting the respect it deserved since the attack. Before Hinata could protest, she was doing neither. Her father responded to Fugaku's claims. Fugaku-san. I would not recommend accusing my daughter in such a manner. Doing so could have consequences. Hiyashi said in a hard tone. Enough. Hiruzen said sternly. He looked at Hiyashi. We are in a crisis. Naruto-kun has been taken by someone, Uchiha or not. This is not the time to argue. He commanded. He looked at Fugaku. Hiruzen searched Fugaku's eyes for deceit. He found plenty of anger and malice, but found no sign that he was lying. He nodded. I am ending this meeting. Everyone leave save for Hiyashi and his daughter. He barked. When the room was empty, both men turned to the small Hyuga. Hinata, what you did was incredibly brave. The Hokage said as he eased Hinata to a chair to sit down. The poor girl looked like she was about to kneel over any second. Hiyashi nodded with the statement, you did very well, Hinata. He praised. They may have been simple words, but to the young heiress, they meant a lot to her. Hinata smiled lightly. Thank you. She said happily. Both men nodded. Now let's get that head wound checked out, shall we? It looks rather nasty, the Hokage said. With Anbu, Kakashi and a young Itachi raced through the forest at high speeds. It had taken them a couple of minutes to summon their teams and organize the search parties. Kakashi's mind was wrecked with worry for his sensei's son. Even though he had never actually talked to the blonde, except for the times he had reassured him after a nightmare on one occasion, Kakashi was fiercely protective of Naruto. When he was born, he was going to treat him as a brother because in a way, he would be. Minato had been like a father to him after his had taken his own life, so, indirectly, Naruto would have been a little brother to him. After the Kyuubi attack and the death of his sensei, Kakashi had raised complete and utter hell to get custody of Naruto. He deserved to have a family that loved him, but the councils, both shinobi and civilian, had stopped him at every turn. They stopped him because it wasn't fair that the Hitaki clan got custody of the village's Jinchuriki when no other clan did. He had nearly gone on a rampage when the councils had made it official that he would never get custody of his little brother. It had taken the combined efforts of Guy and the newly returned Asuma to keep him from raining hell on the village. When it was clear that he couldn't protect Naruto in the daylight like families should, he had gone to the Hokage and asked, closer to demanded, that he be placed on Naruto's protection detail so he could protect him from the shadows. The Hokage agreed, but on the conditions that he couldn't kill everyone who glared at Naruto and he could never speak to him. The god of shinobi knew that Kakashi wouldn't be to refrain himself from leaving the village with Naruto in tow if he had gotten to really know his little brother. Kakashi had been upset that he couldn't talk to his little brother, but he had managed to bargain with the Hokage that he could get to be Naruto's Chunin sensei when he became Genin. How much further? Kakashi asked Itachi in an impatient tone. Not much further, but it may take some time to break through the genjutsus around the shack. Only those who specialize in torture in the Uchiha clan know the exact location of the shack. So keep an eye out. Itachi answered. The said shack was a specialized torture room that the Uchihas used when they had found an enemy trying to steal clan secrets. It had everything in your worst nightmares in it for those who weren't Uchiha, and Itachi had a suspicion that that's where his clansmen had taken Naruto. They arrived at the approximate location of the torture shack and immediately began to dispel genjutsu after genjutsu to reveal its hiding place. Minutes went by before they had broken through the last genjutsu and saw the rundown shed. They heard the high-pitched scream that could only belong to a child in immense pain. Abandoning a lifetime of training, Kakashi leapt forward and kicked the door in. His only thoughts were of saving his younger brother. The two Chunin looked surprised at the sudden intrusion. They had been in the process of skinning the demon alive. It was their third time repeating the process because Naruto healed so fast. How did you go? The Chunin on the right began, but he was cut off by Kakashi's Chidori, piercing his heart. Kakashi threw the now dead Uchiha aside like yesterday's trash before he began to unhook Naruto from a blood-soaked table as Itachi dealt with his kin. Hey, don't cry, Naruto. It'll all be okay now, the bad men can't hurt you. Kakashi tried to comfort the boy as he unstrapped him. As soon as he undid the last strap, however, Naruto jumped up and dashed out the door as fast as he could. He was in too much pain to think clearly or to understand the monks' words. He simply knew he had a chance to escape the awful room and he took it. Naruto ignored the pain in his raw legs as he sprinted as fast as he could. He had been in more pain than that by far, so he could endure a little more if it meant escape. Naruto! Kakashi yelled as he chased after the terrified boy. Naruto was too far gone to listen, but in his heavily injured state, he was no match for the Chunin's speed. Kakashi landed in front of Naruto, a few yards away, and he skidded to a halt in front of the masked man. Naruto. I'm not going to hurt you, I promise. Kakashi said, hoping to calm the boy, but Naruto wasn't listening. He was in too much pain. Despite his skin rapidly regrowing, he was still in massive amounts of mind-numbing pain. He could still feel where he was skinned alive, where they burned him, and so much more. When he saw Kakashi in his way, instead of seeing a savior, he saw someone who was trying to bring him back to that room. Naruto sprung forward, raising a scalpel that he had swiped as he ran through the door, and charged Kakashi in a zigzag formation. When he reached the masked man, he tried to swipe at his throat, but Kakashi stooped it by catching Naruto by the wrist. Stop! Kakashi's pleas for the boy to calm down were interrupted by Naruto roundhousing his ribs. Kakashi grunted in annoyance as he pinned the boy's leg to his body. He moves like sensei. Kakashi thought in surprise. Minato Namikaze had developed his own taijutsu style. He was an orphan, so he had no clan techniques that relied on speed and being unpredictable. Naruto didn't stop there. He threw a punch, only for Kakashi to dodge it. Naruto used his free leg and used it to kick away from Kakashi. Naruto was panicking. He couldn't go back in that room. No matter the cost, he was getting away. Naruto took a breath and in blind panic, he gave in to instinct. Naruto charged Kakashi again, but this time he threw the scalpel as a distraction. Predictably, Kakashi dodged, but it gave Naruto the opening he needed. With a war cry, Naruto charged a beautiful spiraling ball in his right hand. He had no idea how he did it, nor did he really care. Kakashi's eyes widened underneath his mask. How in the hell was a 6-year-old boy using the Rasengan? Kakashi shoved the thought to the side for later. Right now he had to deal with a 6-year-old in possession with his sensei's jutsu. Kakashi grabbed Naruto's wrist and yanked it towards the ground, causing the incomplete Rasengan to implode on itself before exploding. Both Naruto and Kakashi were blown backwards by the explosion. Naruto landed on his head much like Hinata and got knocked out as Kakashi landed on his feet with practiced ease. Kakashi walked towards Naruto with a sense akin to awe filling him. He had just used sensei's jutsu. It was incredible, it was indescribable how amazing what Naruto had just done. Kakashi wondered where Naruto could possibly learn the high-ranking jutsu, but he couldn't think of anyone. There were only 3 people that could use the technique, and that was Sensei, Jiraiya-sama, and himself. None of which had taught him the jutsu. Kakashi figured he'd have to ask him when he woke up. He looked around for his partner and found no sense that he was anywhere nearby. Flying through a few hand signs, Kakashi used the Doden Jutsu to rearrange the earth until it looked as it did before Naruto's imperfect Rasengan. He wanted to keep Naruto's secret to protect him from Danzo and anyone else who wished Naruto harm. Danzo was already pestering the Hokage to let him turn Naruto into a mindless weapon. If he got word of this, his pestering would only worsen, and if the civilian council heard about it, they'd likely call for Naruto's execution for besmirching the Yondaime's memory. Bunch of ignorant bastards. After he finished destroying evidence, he picked Naruto up bridal style and noticed just how light Naruto was. "I'm so sorry, little brother," he thought before he shin-shined to the hospital. Naruto woke to the sharp smell of medicine, alcohol, and hypodermic needles filled his lungs. Opening his eyes and wincing at the bright light, Naruto confirmed that he was where he thought he was. The hospital. He blinked slowly in confusion. The last thing he remembered was the man who was trying to bring him back to that room. Then everything exploded before turning black. Naruto froze in terror when he was blindsided by the memories of what happened in that room. He tried to force the memories away, but they surfaced like a sea beast rearing its ugly head. A sob escaped Naruto's lips before he crushed the tears that were attempting to escape from his eyes. "I'm not crying. I will never cry again," he vowed, and unlike before, he managed to push back the tide of tears. Taking deep breaths, Naruto pushed himself upwards into a sitting position. He felt completely fine other than the phantom pains, he just felt nauseous. He heard the door open and saw that it was the Hokage. "Ah, Naruto-kun, I see you're already awake," Hiruzen said hesitantly. He had heard Kakashi and Itachi's reports on what happened, minus what Kakashi had omitted, and his heart went out to his surrogate grandson. No one should have to endure the horrors that had gone on in that cursed room, least of all a child that couldn't defend himself. Unlike Kakashi, Itachi had spared the second Chunin, and he had been interrogated by Anko and himself personally. Even Anko had been sickened when she heard the things that they did to Naruto, and she was as twisted as they come. Hiruzen had ordered the man to be executed, much to the outrage of Fugaku, but he had no choice but to comply with Hiruzen's ruling since he was under his jurisdiction. Hiruzen had wanted to do more. Much more, but his hands were tied. Fugaku claims that he didn't order the two shinobi to do those things to Naruto and claims that they were acting on their own free will. And without proof that he was lying, Hiruzen could take no action against the Uchiha clan as a whole. Naruto looked at Hiruzen with a 1,000-yard stare. With eyes that belonged to shinobi that had seen one too many battles, eyes that did not belong to a child. He felt a tidal wave of shame and failure rise within his chest as he looked into Naruto's dull eyes. His eyes lost the innocence in them and a large portion of the warmth that had been in there. He knew in that moment he had completely failed his late successor. Naruto followed the Hokage as he sat down in the chair with his eyes. He showed no outward emotion, but on the inside he was getting agitated that the Hokage was sitting so close to him. This was new to Naruto. He had always looked forward to Jiji's company before. Hiruzen looked at Naruto with a concerned look. "How are you feeling, Naruto-kun? Do you wish to talk about what happened?" he asked, hoping the boy wouldn't keep what happened to him bottled up. Naruto shook his head. "I'm fine," he said in the same voice as he always used, but for some reason it sounded different to the Hokage. More mature, more world-weary. But maybe it was to be expected. Naruto hesitated, remembering what had happened in the room. He wanted to talk to Jiji about it, but for some reason he felt afraid. He was afraid that Jiji would finally realize that Naruto was too different from the rest of the village to be around. He was terrified that if he told him what had happened, then Jiji wouldn't love him anymore. He also remembered what had happened before he was taken and how Hinata had valiantly tried to rescue him. "Is Hinata-chan okay? She was beat up pretty bad when she tried to rescue me," Naruto asked, concern replacing the sad look on his face. Hiruzen blinked and felt love for the boy surge. He had just been put through some of the worst torments imaginable, but he was concerned about the brave young girl that had tried to save him. In that moment, Naruto looked identical to Minato. He smiled at Naruto. "Yes, she is doing just fine, Naruto-kun. She had a concussion and required a few stitches, but that is all," he said to a relieved-looking Naruto. He didn't know what he would have done if she had died trying to save him. The Hokage chuckled and earned a questioning look from Naruto. "What's so funny?" he asked. The Hokage chuckled again. "You just reminded me of someone is all, my boy." Naruto, curious of who he had reminded Jiji of, asked, "Who?" Hiruzen debated lying to Naruto, but he had already suffered enough. He refused to add on to it simply because he wanted to avoid a conversation about the boy's father. "You just reminded me of the Yondaime," he said with a smile, amused with the look of shock on Naruto's face. "Really?" he asked in a disbelieving tone. He couldn't believe he had anything in common with his idol. Hiruzen nodded. "Yes. Do you wish to hear how?" Naruto nodded. Hiruzen figured as long as he didn't name any important figures he could tell Naruto about his idol. A long time ago, at the beginning of the Third Shinobi War. This was also before young Minato had become Hokage or invented the jutsu that gave him the moniker, Kahona's Yellow Flash, the Hirei Shinjutsu. When the war began, Minato was a Chunin in charge of the mission of taking over and holding a bridge that would give us access Kumo for a sneak attack. Minato took over the bridge easy enough. He was immensely powerful for someone so young. However, he suffered losses and only had himself and 3 other Chunin holding the bridge. After the attack, Kumo was outraged that Kahona opened up a route so we could attack them, so they responded by sending out several platoons to retake the bridge. They aimed to humiliate us, showing us that any ground we take can be taken back with ease. Minato found out about the platoons as he scouted ahead with his toad summons. When he realized that the enemy was going to try to retake the bridge, do you know what he did? Naruto shook his head, completely captivated by the Hokage's tale. Despite Naruto's traumatic experiences a few days earlier, he was still a 6-year-old that enjoyed hearing a good story. And the fact it was about his hero made it even better. He chose to stand his ground. He knew how valuable the bridge was, and he knew if they retook it then it would have been 10 times harder to take it a second time because they would have more ninja guarding it. He ordered his men to prepare for battle and he sent a messenger toad to Kahona for reinforcements. The enemy arrived 2 days before the reinforcements did, but Minato and his team held the bridge like the world depended on it. They were outnumbered hopelessly, but they kept fighting. They used jutsu after jutsu after jutsu, even after they were exhausted from depleted chakra. However, as the day wore on, they went down to 3 Chunin, then 2, until it was only Minato left holding the bridge against a third of a platoon. He was heavily wounded and was on the verge of ODing from taking too many soldier pills, but he still fought on. He refused to let his comrades' sacrifices be in vain, so he held the bridge for an entire day all alone. He pushed back wave after wave of enemy ninja all by himself, and by the time the reinforcements got there, only a third of the original amount of enemy ninja remained. Kumo was very angry that they weren't able to retake the bridge, and they decided that if they couldn't have the bridge, then no one could. Naruto felt a pang of fear for his hero but said nothing. The reinforcements arrived and treated Minato for his wounds, but while just about everyone was asleep, the Kumo ninja snuck in and placed explosive tags on the bridge. Naruto clenched the sheets, eagerly anticipating what would happen next. Hiruzen smiled slightly as he saw this but continued. In the middle of the night, Kumo detonated the explosive tags and immediately the bridge was demolished. Luckily, not many of our ninja were harmed by the initial blast because they weren't camped on the bridge, but large pieces of debris rained on their nearby camp. Minato, even though he was heavily injured, saw a large piece of debris that was going to land on a red-headed ninja. With speed that he's known for, he pushed her over and chose to let the debris fall on him instead, protecting the red-headed kunoichi. The debris broke several of young Minato's bones and he passed out due to blood loss after he and the kunoichi were safe. He awoke days later, and the first thing he asked me when he woke was if the kunoichi was okay, even though he had just been put through the ringer. You reminded me of him not only because your first concern was of another but also because, like you, Minato was also an orphan. Naruto's eyes went wide at that. While everyone knew about the Yondaimi's achievements, not many people bothered to learn how he got started. Most assumed that he was from a small unrenowned clan, but Naruto never would have thought that he was an orphan like him. Really? He asked in a disbelieving tone. The Hokage nodded. Yes, he was very much like you, Naruto-kun. Almost nobody believed in him. Naruto definitely couldn't believe that. Who in their right mind doubt the man who became the Yondaime? Hiruzen chuckled at Naruto's ridiculous expression before continuing. Yes. Nobody believed that he would ever amount to anything. They all thought he was unreliable or he could never become strong because he didn't have a clan. But he never let that get to him. No matter what they did or said, he kept training and training. He used their doubts as fuel and well, you know the result. Hiruzen finished, hoping that his story would inspire the boy to look past what had happened. Naruto was quiet. It was easy to draw parallels between the Yondaime and himself. He could see what Gigi was doing. Naruto looked down at his hands and thought. He wanted to do what the Yondaime did. Ignore the pain and the doubts and use them as fuel to continue on and do something great. Then he began to think about how he had always wanted to be like the Yondaime. So why couldn't he just look past it? If the Yondaime could do it and become one of the greatest heroes ever, so why couldn't he? And he had even gone through worse than the late Hokage, so that meant that he had even more fuel than he did. He could become stronger than the Yondaime. Hiruzen felt a wave of pride swell in his chest as he saw a determined glint return in Naruto's eye. They no longer looked as dull as they had been mere seconds ago, though it was true that they still weren't as bright as they were before, but considering what the child had gone through, it wasn't surprising. "I'm gonna surpass the Yondaime Jiji. Just you watch," Naruto exclaimed before jumping out of bed and through the window. Luckily he was on the first story. He felt much better now and was eager to start his training, but first he had to stop by his apartment. The Hokage chuckled at Naruto's antics and left the room, but before he could leave the hospital he was approached by a doctor. "Hokage-sama, could I possibly have a moment of your time? I think there's something you should see in Naruto's chart," the doctor said in a slightly urgent tone. Hiruzen looked alarmed and held out his hand and quickly examined the chart for any anomaly. His eyes went wide when he found one. Patient: Naruto Uzumaki. Age: 6. Height: 3 feet 9. Hair color: blonde. Eye color: blue. Chakra levels: high. Kage. "This must be a mistake. Run the test again," Hiruzen said as he returned the chart. "Forgive me, Hokage-sama, but we have. This is the 20th time on 4 different machines," the doctor said in an almost frightened tone. He had never seen such chakra levels in any ninja. Hiruzen froze at this. Could it be possible? Naruto was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, but that shouldn't bring his chakra levels up to high Kage levels at the age of 6. Even Kushina's levels weren't that high at Naruto's age. Could it be because of the Yondaime's seal? Jiraiya had said that it also acted as a filter for the Kyuubi's chakra. He explained that once a week a small portion of the beast's chakra would be purified before mixing with Naruto's. Could it be that that small portion was enough to bring Naruto's levels up this high? It was the only answer that made any sense. He couldn't help but to wear a small smile as he exited the building. Believing that if anyone could surpass the Yondaime, it was Naruto. At Naruto's apartment, Naruto walked into his beat-up looking apartment and locked the door behind him. His apartment was on the small side, but in Naruto's opinion the balcony made up for it. The paint on the walls was chipping and stained in the places that weren't covered in graffiti but that was covered by dozens of posters of movies he's never seen because he wasn't allowed in the movie theater. His furniture had seen its best days long before Naruto had bought it. His bed had more holes and springs sticking out of it than there were inside of it. But he didn't mind any of that. This was his home and he'd make the best out of it. Naruto walked into his small kitchen to make himself some ramen before he figured out how he was going to start training. That's when he noticed a small green scroll that was laying in the center of his table. Naruto looked confusedly around his small apartment, wondering how someone got in here and why they left a scroll for him. He picked up the scroll and opened it. 6 a.m. Physical training. 8 a.m. Taijutsu training. 9 a.m. Ninjutsu training. 10 a.m. 3 p.m. Academy, library if kicked out. 4 p.m. Chakra control. 6 p.m. Weapons training. 7 p.m. Kenjutsu training. 8 p.m. Fuinjutsu training. 9 p.m. Meditation. Naruto was surprised by the scroll's contents. He had just been wondering how he should train and here was the answer. He figured that it was the Hokage that had asked one of his ninja to break into his apartment and leave it after he had left the hospital. He was a bit annoyed that someone had broken in, but he got over when he saw the kick-ass training he had ahead of him. He unraveled the scroll a bit further and saw a few seals. It seemed familiar to him and he channeled a little chakra into it, following the instinct that told him to do so, and out popped more scrolls. All of which were D-ranked elemental jutsus. There were a few for each element. Excitedly, he pumped chakra into the other 3 seals. One was a wooden bakken, the other held sealing supplies, and the last was kunai, shuriken, and a few books on taijutsu and kenjutsu styles, fuinjutsu, chakra control exercise, and a book called 101 Things That a Shinobi Need to Know. His schedule outlining what he was going to be doing for his physical training was also in the pile. Naruto was bubbling with excitement as he stared at the small pile of new training supplies that had gathered on his table. Naruto checked his clock and saw that it was only a little past 4, so he quickly sealed everything back up, not even thinking about how he knew how to do it, and took off to a nearby training field with his new sealing supplies, bakken and the scrolls for chakra control, taijutsu and kenjutsu styles, and a scroll on how to meditate. He blew right past the hidden Kakashi right above his doorway. Kakashi smiled beneath his mask, happy that his little brother was happy with the training schedule he had laid out for him. He wanted Naruto to practice both Minato and Kushina's abilities because Naruto was the legacy of them both. He was the last Uzumaki and the last Namikaze. He deserved to be properly taught. He may have used the Rasengan, but that wasn't enough to protect him from everything. After all, you can't surpass someone as strong as Naruto's father with one technique. You have to be a well-rounded ninja, and Kakashi wanted to help Naruto become a well-rounded ninja. That way he could achieve his dream. After all, Sensei wanted the same thing. Naruto was walking through the crowded market to get to the training ground. He always walked this path when he went to the training ground, but something was different. People still glared at him as he walked by, but for some reason it seemed heavier. The glares had the same amount of hatred for him and animosity. It all looked the same as always. However, to Naruto, it felt like a heavy weight had been placed on his shoulders. He would flinch at every loud noise, ready to fight or flee at the drop of a hat. His palms were sweating furiously as he felt waves of anxiety when someone would come a little too close for his liking. His eyes were darting furiously, taking note of everything: threats, escape routes, what could be used as a weapon and what he could use to delay distraction if someone attacked him. Naruto was having a panic attack, though he did not know it. He was taking shallow breaths, struggling to calm his pounding heart. Suddenly, it became too much for the boy as he broke out into a flat-out sprint away from the crowded market. He knocked over a cabbage cart, but he ignored the mont's cries. He just had to get away. Naruto didn't slow down until he had reached the secluded training ground. After he stopped, he was racking his brain trying to figure out what had happened to him. Naruto had never been that nervous. He had almost been petrified with fear that someone was going to try and harm him. Taking deep breaths, he calmed himself. I guess it may be harder to put it behind me than I thought. Naruto thought sadly. He desperately wanted what happened to him to stay in the past, but it seemed like it had left a bigger impression on him than he had originally thought. However, he wouldn't tell anyone about the panic attacks. He would rather deal with them for the rest of his life than have the only two people that treated him with kindness look at him like everyone else. Maybe training will help, he muttered to himself as he grabbed the chakra control scroll and began reading. Despite his loud and ADD ways, Naruto was a complete bookworm. Not many people knew this, but reading was one of Naruto's few escapes from the harsh reality that was his life. Because books would never glare at him. They never denied him his right to exist for reasons unknown to him. No, books just simply wanted to be read. It didn't matter by who. Naruto absorbed the knowledge from the first chapter of the scroll. The rest was blocked by some sort of seal, faster than any sponge. The first chapter was detailing the leaf chakra control exercise and the several stages of the exercise. First off, he needed a leaf, and thanks to the forest he found one fairly easily. The first step was to get it to stick to the user's forehead with the use of chakra. The book said that this step only took an hour or two at most to master for children his age. Sticking the leaf to his forehead, Naruto began to channel chakra to the point of contact. Much to his surprise, the leaf blew away from his head the moment he dropped his hand, as if it was being blown away by a hurricane before burning up due to intense chakra. Naruto blinked slowly in confusion. The scroll certainly didn't say anything about that. In mild annoyance, he grabbed another leaf and got the same result. In annoyance, he grabbed another. Then another. Then another. He got the same result every time, and he was starting to get angry. How is this a basic skill? This was freaking impossible. 30 minutes later, he was sighing to himself as he went to grab another leaf, but noticed a small pebble next to the leaf he had been aiming for. Ignoring the leaf, Naruto picked up the pebble and examined it thoughtfully. If it works with a leaf, it should work with a rock, right? He asked himself as he placed the pebble on the tip of his finger before channeling a bit of chakra and aimed it at a nearby tree. As expected, the pebble blew off his fingertip. However, what Naruto didn't expect was for the pebble to travel through the tree, nor did he expect to hear a loud eep before a small girl tumbled out of the bushes a foot away from where the pebble had passed. Naruto blinked in confusion, a little bothered that he was being spied on, but then he recognized the girl. Hinata got up and looked at Naruto in embarrassment. She had been spying on Naruto since he arrived at the clearing. She was making sure Naruto was okay. She saw him in the crowded market and saw he looked incredibly afraid. When she saw him take off running, she followed and ditched her guard Ko. Naruto took in Hinata's appearance. She wore her usual beige jacket that was a size or two too big and black shinobi pants with matching. However, Naruto was paying more attention to the white bandages that were wrapped around her head where it had busted open. Hiyashi had chosen for Hinata to get stitches instead of ninja medical healing because he was proud of his daughter. He made the bandages and stitches badges of honor because she had been unafraid to stand up to two Chunin ninja to protect someone. He had been slightly annoyed that it was the village Jinchuriki, but he would take it. Naruto felt immense guilt as he looked at Hinata's bandages, remembering how hurt she had been when she tried to save him. Hinata was blushing furiously as Naruto looked at her intently, his blue eyes taking in every detail. "Why?" he asked in a hushed whisper. Hinata looked up in confusion. "What?" she asked. "Why did you try to save me?" Naruto asked his full question. Hinata blushed and began to play with her fingers, a nervous habit she had developed, "Because I didn't want them to hurt you, Naruto-kun." She stuttered out before looking down at the ground in shame. "I'm sorry that I couldn't save you," she said in an upset tone, sounding close to tears. She was angry with herself that she hadn't been able to do more. She looked up at Naruto, who looked as if he was questioning everything he knew about his life, with a worried expression. "Did they hurt you?" she asked, remembering the words the cruel Uchihas had said. A tormented look pasted over his face as Naruto looked down at the ground as well. "Yes," he answered simply. Hinata felt like crying as her fears had been confirmed. Before she could stop herself she asked, "What did they do?" Naruto kept looking at the ground, tears stinging at his eyes, but he kept his vow, "Bad things," he answered in a broken tone. A few upset tears leaked out Hinata's eyes. Despite being so young, Hinata knew what bad things were due to the fact she came from a clan of ninja clan that didn't shield their children from the horrors of the harsh life of the shinobi. Without thinking about it, she crossed the distance and gave Naruto the hug he desperately needed. All she knew was that Naruto was practically radiating sadness and she wanted it to stop. She didn't have romantic feelings for Naruto, she was 6 years old. That was years too soon for her to even think about boys in that way. But Hinata was a kind soul. When she saw sadness, especially in Naruto, she wanted it to stop. And the only way she could think to plug the sadness was through physical contact. Naruto was dumbfounded by the sensation of another person wrapping their arms around him. He could count on one hand how many times he had been hugged in his life, and all of them were from Gigi. He never would have thought he would ever hug a girl. They were IKY, but Hinata was less so. Naruto was so shocked by the hug that he couldn't even think to have a panic attack or feel like he was going to be attacked. Partly because Hinata was his own age, and while he was bullied by kids his age he was never beaten, but mainly it was because somehow he felt like he could trust Hinata. He saw firsthand that she was willing to take a beating to save him, something he's never had done for him, that he knew of. Timidly Naruto wrapped his arms around Hinata and he just enjoyed the soothing contact. He felt his fears and worries diminish and felt something he'd never experienced before. Acceptance. Maybe he got it from Gigi and Iruka-sensei, but he was always afraid that if he messed up too big then they would hate him. He never had unconditional acceptance before and he found he rather liked the feeling. They stood hugging each other for several minutes before Naruto broke the hug, but he still had his hands on her shoulders. "Thank you," he said in an honest tone. Hinata blushed but mumbled "You're welcome." Naruto dropped his arms and smiled slightly. After a few awkward seconds he said, "So Hinata-chan, would you like to train with me?" He asked in a hesitant tone, not really sure how to ask or what he should do now. Hinata hesitated then nodded with a blush. "IW would enjoy that Naruto-kun," she responded, not even thinking about how distressed her guard Ko was going to be thinking he lost her. Naruto smiled before taking her hand and leading her to the tree that he had stashed the scrolls and other training equipment. "I'm practicing chakra control right now. I'm doing the leaf training exercise but I'm having some trouble with it," he explained as he presented the scroll to her. Hinata took the scroll gratefully, not telling Naruto that she already knew how to do the exercise not only due to her clan but they had mastered the exercise last week in class. Naruto didn't know this because his teacher had kicked him out for some vague reason. "Thank you Naruto-kun. I saw that you were having some trouble, would you like my help?" Hinata asked, hoping she wouldn't offend her new friend. Naruto smiled sheepishly. "You saw that?" I guess you did when I almost shot you with that pebble. Anyways, you can help me? Really? Naruto asked. Hinata nodded before activating her Byakugan. Naruto awed at seeing the dojutsu. Wow. Your eyes look so cool. What do they do? He asked in an excited tone. Hinata blushed slightly at the praise at her Keke Genkai but explained what her eyes could do. This is my Keke Genkai, the Byakugan. It allows me to see all around me and people's chakra network. Then I can use my clan's taijutsu style, the gentle fist, to close an enemy's tenketsu. She explained with pride. Most people didn't know this, but she was one of the earliest Hyugas to activate their Keke Genkai. Naruto wowed again before saying, thanks for helping me, but how exactly are you going to? Naruto wondered. I'm going to see how much chakra you're using and tell you if you're using too much or too little. She explained further. Naruto nodded and grabbed another leaf before plastering it to his forehead. Ready? He asked and started to mold chakra when she nodded. Hinata could only gape as she truly paid attention to Naruto's chakra coils. Earlier she had just been showing what her Keke Genkai looked like and couldn't see Naruto's chakra network. He had more chakra than anyone she had ever seen. And she had once looked at the Hokage's chakra coils before. She was so shocked that she completely forgot that she was supposed to be telling Naruto how much chakra to use. Hinata-chan? Everything okay? He asked in a concerned tone. Hinata resembled a fish that was gasping for air and that worried Naruto. Hinata nodded dumbly before breaking out of her stupor. Yes, I'm fine. You're using too much chakra. She said, awe still evident in her tone. How much too much? Naruto asked. About 1,000 times too much. She said, causing Naruto to sweat dropped. Really? That much? How about now? He asked as he drastically lowered the chakra concentration. Still too much, but you're only about 100 times too much now. Naruto lowered it again and again before Hinata said that Naruto was using little enough chakra for the leaf to stick. He dropped his hand that was holding up the leaf and amazingly it didn't shoot up at 100 miles an hour. Sweet. Thank you, Hinata-chan. Naruto exclaimed with the leaf still sticking to him. Ecstatic that he finally got the blasted leaf to stick, and it was all thanks to Hinata and her special eyes. Hinata smiled sweetly at him, happy that she could have helped. You're welcome, Naruto-kun. Naruto beamed before grabbing a nearby leaf and presented said leaf to her. Now you try. Hinata reached out to accept the leaf, but before she could, the two of them heard a very loud, Hinata-sama. Hinata turned around and saw it was her absolutely furious guard Ko. Hinata-sama, step away from the monster. He yelled as he crossed the distance in seconds and grabbed Hinata by the wrist and yanked her away from Naruto. Hinata looked up at Ko in confusion, but realization dawned on her when she realized that she was referring to Naruto. Hinata yanked her wrist out of Ko's hand and glared up at her guard. To say that Ko was surprised by the action would be the understatement of the century. Ko had never seen the kind, gentle Hinata glare at anyone. Heck, he didn't even think she knew how to glare. Much less sending such a harsh and angry one like she was giving him right now. Ko-san, I would greatly appreciate it if you would not call Naruto-kun such a cruel name. Hinata said in a mature tone, not stuttering at all except for when she tripped up over the word appreciate. Ko was starting to question if this was really Hinata-sama at all at this point. Hinata could never go a full sentence without stuttering up a storm, and don't even get him started on the commanding tone. She almost sounded like the Hyuga heiress like she was. Naruto looked at Hinata in surprise as well before a small smile graced his lips. It's okay, Hinata-chan. I'm used to it by now. He said and earned a sad look from Hinata. But Naruto-kun. Naruto held up a hand, seeming ages older than he looked. It's okay. I guess you should head home so your family won't be worried. He said with a smile. Ko was beginning to think that someone had placed a genjutsu on him. First the terribly shy Hinata stood up to him and glared. Now the demon brat was acting concerned about the Hyuga heiress. What in Kami's name was going on here? Was he under some genjutsu? Apparently not after he disrupted his chakra. Why yes, Hinata-sama. You are late for training. He said, trying to hurry the conversation along so he wouldn't get in more trouble with the main branch. Hinata gave Naruto one last look before nodding that she was ready to leave. The two of them left and Naruto continued on with his training for several more hours. Like the scroll in his apartment said, he started on his kenjutsu training with his new Bakken. He decided to start with the kenjutsu style called the Whirlpool of Blades, the Uzumaki kenjutsu style, but Naruto didn't know that, and Naruto took to it like a fish to water. He practically mastered the basic katas of the style in the hour he practiced. Naruto couldn't explain it, but the movements just felt natural to him. Like his body already knew what to do. He practiced with the shuriken and kunai for a while. He aimed at trees and leaves that were falling. His throws were dead on with still objects, but he missed every other leaf. After that he started his fuinjutsu training, and there wasn't an analogy to describe how quickly he picked up on the art. He took to it better than a duck to water, faster than a bird took to the skies, faster than a Uzumaki. Naruto absorbed the knowledge in the first chapter and understood it fully, something that was almost unheard of except for the Uzumaki, and Naruto had surpassed their natural aptitude for the art. He had blew past the seals that tried to prevent from reading ahead as he read. He didn't learn how to make seals in the scroll, but learned the ideas behind fuinjutsu. Lastly, Naruto began his meditation. He took up the lotus position and tried to enter his mindscape like the scroll instructed him to. However, he met unexpected resistance. Every time he tried to enter his mindscape, he was greeted by a large white wall that prevented him from entering, and despite his every attempt to break through, he failed each time no matter what he did. He spent the last hour either trying to break the wall or searching the scroll for answers, but found none. He figured if he didn't find an answer in the library, then he would ask Gigi about the mysterious wall. After the final hour, he packed everything up before heading back to his apartment. With Hinata during training, Hinata sat in her clan's dojo waiting for a lecture from her father. How he was disappointed in her for not taking her training seriously, even though she was behind on her gentle fist training. Then he would look at her with those mean, disappointed eyes, almost similar to the ones Naruto received, and he would insult her and call her a failure after an intense training session. After that she would cry and seek the comfort of Naruto's presence. Though now, if she was lucky, she wouldn't have to hide behind walls or bushes. Maybe Naruto would allow her to train with him again, or maybe he would even give her a hug like the one she gave him earlier. Hinata blushed, remembering how nice Naruto had felt. She wasn't sure why she was blushing, probably embarrassment at her boldness. Her father walked in and gave her a stern look. Hinata mentally braced herself for the lecture that was bound to come. "Where were you for afternoon training?" Hiyashi asked, already knowing the answer but wanted to hear it from his daughter. I was training with Naruto-kun," she answered, already wincing to be prepared for the harsh tone. "I see. Very well," Hisahi said, enjoying the confused look on his daughter's face. Ko had informed him that Hinata went missing for an hour under his care. He also told him in great detail how Hinata had took a stand when he had insulted Naruto after he found her again. If he didn't know that Ko was too afraid to lie to him, he would have never believed him. However, when he remembered that Hinata had courageously attacked two Chunin in the boy's defense, maybe it wasn't that hard to believe after all. Hiyashi couldn't express how happy he was that Hinata was finally standing up to someone. He had been trying to get her to do that since her mother died. He had been trying to expel the crippling kindness in her through intense training that left her battered and bruised. He tried to verbally attacking her when the training didn't work. If it did anything, it made her more timid and withdrawn. He was beginning to run out of ideas. Everything was failing and she was in danger of losing her title as the heiress if something didn't happen soon. It turns out that all she needed was someone to stand up for. Did he wish it was someone other than the village's Jinchuriki? Yes, but he much preferred her spending time with him than her staying the timid, unconfident, shy failure that she was now. Hinata blinked several times, wondering if her ears had deceived her. Father? Why you're not mad? She asked, stuttering worse because she was afraid that it was a cruel joke to worsen her self-confidence. Hiyashi smiled lightly. No. If you had been doing anything other than training and if you didn't stand up to Ko, then I would be very angry. I assume that you wish to continue to train with Naruto? Hiyashi asked and received an eager nod from Hinata. You may continue to train with Naruto on the conditions of you must not fall further behind in your gentle fist training than you already are, and you must ditch Ko to do so. Hiyashi said. He was impressed with Hinata's ability to lose her guard. Ko had been specifically chosen to guard Hinata because he was incredibly talented for a branch member, only seconded to his late brother's son, Neji. Not only was he talented, but being able to get away from a Hyuga was no easy task in itself. Even when he was a child, he could never manage to get away from his guard for 5 minutes, let alone almost an hour. He wanted her to train the skill. It would be invaluable for her shinobi career. Sure, it was dangerous for her to go around unattended, but Hiyashi was confident that nothing would happen to Hinata as long as Naruto was around. If he was truly Minato's son, then he would hold off any attackers long enough for help to arrive. Hinata tried to keep her joy from being seen, but she failed when a full-blown smile was plastered on her face. Hiyashi blinked in surprise. He hadn't seen Hinata this happy since before her mother died. Hinata bowed low. "Thank you, father," she said without a stutter. Hiyashi smiled internally before nodding. "Since you missed today's training, do 10 laps around the courtyard." Hinata jumped up and complied. And at the end of the day, a small grin could still be seen on her lips. The next day, Naruto was the first one in the classroom. He was feeling slightly exhausted from the borderline insane workout he had done that morning. When he had actually read what the physical training entailed, he had nearly blenched. It started off with 5 laps around the village, then 50 pull-ups that were immediately followed by 100 push-ups. Then the same number of sit-ups, crunches, squats, then a variety of other exercises that he didn't know how to describe other than they were incredibly difficult and painful. It seems that whoever gave him the workout knew about his incredible stamina. He finished on time, then he instantly started on his taijutsu training. He decided to start with the cheetah style first. It focused on lighting fast attacks and unpredictably. Right up his alley. It had gone well, but not compared to how well and fast he had learned the other things. He had an extreme aptitude for, but there were times that the movements felt awkward. On some stances, his instincts were telling him to do something different from what the scroll before him told him to do. He was confused about that, but he did his best to ignore the instincts because he knew the stances were correct. After that was ninjutsu, his favorite. He had grabbed all the scrolls, but in the end he had decided to practice the Academy 3. He desperately wanted to be able to shoot lightning out of his fingertips or breath fire, but he knew that they weren't needed to graduate. Maybe he could get extra credit for them, but they weren't priority. He practiced the Henge Jutsu and the Kawarimi Jutsu. He decided to try the Clone Jutsu for tomorrow because how hard could it be? He practiced and fine-tuned the Henge Jutsu, trying to add more small details to make it perfect. It's the solid version, but it wasn't perfect yet, but didn't make much progress with Kawarimi. He figured it was his chakra control and decided he would train that extra hard today. After he finished training, he headed back home to clean up and go to school. He had another panic attack on the way to the academy, so he deduced that the cause of the attacks were people. So he sat in the secluded corner in the back of the class while reading about the founders of Kahona. He had gotten the book from Iruka-sensei before the start of class. Iruka was worried about Naruto. He had heard that he was kidnapped over the weekend, but that was it. He didn't know by whom, nor did he know what happened to Naruto during the time he was with his captors, but it had obviously traumatized the boy. Naruto was always loud and borderline obnoxious, desperate for any kind of attention, but now he was silent. He sat in the back of the classroom even though every other seat was available and tried to avoid attention like it was the plaque. It was like his personality did a complete 180. Iruka was going to ask if everything was okay, but children began to file in and take their seats. Iruka decided to ask Naruto what happened after class. None of the students noticed the difference in Naruto's personality switch. They all ignored Naruto anyways. Naruto was still reading when he heard a soft voice ask him, "See, can I sit here?" Hinata asked. Naruto looked up from his book and smiled at Hinata, as sure. He answered. Truth be told, he half expected for Hinata to avoid him during the day so that no one would know that she was friends with the demon. Not that he minded, he was just happy to have a friend. Even if she didn't want it to be known. Hinata smiled gratefully as she took the seat next to Naruto and paid attention to the lesson that was beginning. Iruka was talking about the format of genin teams and how teamwork played an important role. Class went by rather quickly. Some students were sending questioning looks at Naruto now. He usually disrupted a lesson at least once, but today he had been silent. They also noticed that Hinata was sitting by him, which confused them. Who would want to be friends with the freak? Didn't her parents tell her to stay away from him like theirs did? It was time for their lunch break and Hinata and Naruto sat underneath the tree with the swing. They sat as far away from the other kids as they could, that way Naruto could eat in peace. Hinata was kind enough to share some of her lunch when she saw that all Naruto had was cold ramen. Naruto thanked her repeatedly and promised that he would bring something for her tomorrow. So Dobi, it seems like you finally learned your place? It's about time. I'm glad the lessons that my cousins taught you took. Sasuke said behind Naruto, commenting on how he was silent during class. When Sasuke had told his father that he had lost to the Dobi, he made Sasuke train intensely all night. If it wasn't for his mother's herbs, he wouldn't be able to stand, and even with them he barely could days later. But before the intense training session, 2 Chunin of his clan had approached him and asked if the rumors were true. He had been reluctant to confirm them, but when he did, they promised him that Naruto would pay for embarrassing their clan. Sasuke didn't know what they did to Naruto, but he was glad that he learned a lesson in humility. All of his yapping in class was annoying and he couldn't surpass his brother if there were distractions like Naruto. Naruto froze. Did he just hear what he thought he heard? Did this Uchiha Teme have the audacity to say that he was glad that he was tortured for hours on end? Naruto felt uncontrollable amounts of pure unadulterated rage sweep through him. Hinata looked appalled at what Sasuke had just said. She didn't know exactly what happened to Naruto at the hands of his cousins, but she had a vague idea. Naruto had never been this angry. He wanted to beat the Uchiha down until he had the same texture as pudding. He blamed Sasuke for what happened to him. If Sasuke hadn't told anyone that he lost, or if he had been better and beaten him, then Naruto wouldn't had to endure hell at the hands of his cousins. Naruto was getting up to beat the living daylights out of Sasuke when Hinata placed a hand lightly on his wrist. Naruto looked at Hinata with an angry, confused look. He was slightly annoyed that she was trying to stop him from giving the Uchiha a good pounding, but he knew she must have a reason for it. Hinata blushed slightly before saying, "Don't Naruto-kun. He's not worth it." Naruto wanted to argue, to say that the Teme deserved to have his face smashed in, but if he thought about it, she was right. Not only would his family come after him again if he knocked Sasuke into next week, but he would disappoint Hinata, and Sasuke simply wasn't worth that. He also knew that Hinata didn't mean that when she said he wasn't worth it. She probably meant some deep reason, like he would be no better than them if he did, but Naruto was far more concerned Hinata's opinion of him. Naruto sat back down with a huff, sending Sasuke a glare as he did so. Hinata smiled at him before offering him a cinnamon bun that she had snuck in her lunch, and Naruto accepted. They were both totally ignoring the fuming Sasuke. How dare they say that he's not worth something? Who did these 2 losers think they were? He was an Uchiha, they were dirt underneath his feet. His father had all but beaten the ideals that the Uchiha clan were Kami's greatest gift to ever be bestowed onto mankind. They were Konoha's elite, and that everyone else that wasn't an Uchiha was trash that should only be associated with if it couldn't be avoided. His older brother tried to tell him that the clan's ideals were wrong, but Sasuke would have none of it. His older brother was as strong as he was because he was an Uchiha, and one day Sasuke was going to surpass him. Sasuke clenched his fists in anger. Before he knew it, he flung himself at Naruto. Nobody insults him and gets away with it. He was an Uchiha. He was the best, his father told him so. Sasuke tackled Naruto from behind, causing him to tumble over. Naruto landed on his back and Sasuke was above him. Sasuke threw a punch at Naruto's face, but Naruto had grabbed his wrist and made him hit the ground next to his head. Naruto punched upwards and hit Sasuke in the mouth before he placed a foot on his stomach and threw him over. Both boys scrabbled to get up first to attack one another. Sasuke had somehow regained his balance first and launched another fist at him, trying to repay Naruto for the punch. However, before the punch could make contact with Naruto's cheek, a blue-haired girl jumped in front of the attack. The blow knocked Hinata sideways. She had tried to stop the 2 boys from fighting since there were no teachers around that could see the fight, but she had jumped in too late and got hit instead. Naruto saw red as he glared bloody murder at the Uchiha before him and went to pound him into next year, but Hinata had grabbed his wrist again. She looked up at him with pleading eyes. She knew that Naruto could get hurt again if he beat the Teme up again. Please don't fight Naruto-kun," she asked in a pleading voice. Naruto clenched his fist in anger. He glared at the Uchiha. Oh, how he wanted to completely demolish Sasuke for harming his one friend. But what do you do when said friend is asking you not to hurt the person that hurt her? You're lucky Hinata-chan doesn't want me to hurt you. But if you ever hurt her again, I'll kill you. Naruto said in a threatening tone. His voice growling deeper until it was almost a growl, it was almost inhuman. Hinata-chan protected Sasuke this time from his wrath, but he would not let Hinata get hurt by the blasted Uchiha again. Sasuke felt a shiver go down his spine at the threat. Naruto said the words with complete and utter certainty. It was as if there would be no doubt about his death at Naruto's hands. Swallowing his fears, like his father instructed him to, Sasuke scoffed, "Yeah right Dobi." He kicked over Hinata's lunch and spilled its few content on the grass, "Just you try it. Who knows, maybe I'll have my cousins teach you another lesson on where your place is freak." Sasuke insulted before cockily walking off. If it weren't for Hinata's hand firmly on his wrist he would have murdered the Teme then and there. After he left, Hinata let go of Naruto's wrist and he helped Hinata clean up her lunch before they did the same, but before they entered Hinata said, "I am sorry for stopping you but..." Hinata began, fearing that Naruto would be mad at her, but Naruto stopped her with a hand again. "Don't worry about it Hinata-chan, you were right. Trash like him isn't worth it, but if he ever hurts you again, I will kill him," he said in a tone that made him sound like an adult making a promise. Hinata gave Naruto a shy look. She was slightly nervous that Naruto was saying that he was going to kill someone, but at the same time she was thankful that he was willing to go to such lengths to protect her. "Is your cheek okay?" he asked, dropping the tone before giving the relieved looking and nodding Hinata a lopsided grin. "Do you think you could train with me after school today?" he asked. Hinata hesitated then nodded. She was already forming plans to ditch Ko. Naruto smiled before grabbing her hand and lead both of them back to class. It had been a month since Naruto started training to surpass his idol, and the progress he made was inconceivable. He was the greatest prodigy in hundreds of years, though no one knew he wasn't a natural one. Naruto had made unbelievable progress in every field that he trained in. Surprisingly, the seals that prevented him from reading further would dissipate once he mastered the level he was on. He didn't know how the seal knew when he mastered the level, but he aimed to find out as he furthered his Fuinjutsu studies. He mastered the basic and adept levels of the cheetah fist and the whirlpool dance styles. The whirlpool dance was much like his Kenjutsu style, the whirlpool of blades style, and Naruto figured that they were created by the same people. He trained in the basics until they were no longer instinct. He trained them until they were reflexes. His instincts still occasionally acted up, but for the first time he ignored them. Though the instincts were impeding his progress in taijutsu a great deal, Naruto was still excelling at everything else. His physical conditioning increased as well. He had been able to double the original schedule now. Because of his Uzumaki heritage and the Kyuubi's yang chakra in him, Naruto healed at an abnormal rate and he knew it. Because he healed so quickly, Naruto didn't bother restricting his training. He knew he would heal, so why bother holding back? He trained his body into the ground, day after day. There was a saying by the Shodai Hokage that described Naruto perfectly in that regard. There is one thing more frightening than someone who knows their limit. Someone who knows that they don't have one. He was building muscle thanks to the lunches that Hinata packed for him every day. He was still lean, but he was no longer a waifish twig. He still went to the academy daily, but he completely disregarded everything they tried to teach him. He only listened when it was Iruka-sensei teaching, but he already knew most of the things Iruka taught. Naruto only bothered to show up because of Hinata-chan. He wanted to keep her company during the boring classes and wanted to keep an eye on the Teme to make sure he didn't try something. Naruto and Sasuke didn't have a rivalry going, because that would mean that they were close in skill level. Naruto repeatedly crushed Sasuke in everything. Accuracy, spars, jutsu, grades. The teachers had been promised a very painful and bloody end if they continued to try to sabotage Naruto's education, from a certain masked ninja. Naruto crushed Sasuke in absolutely everything, much to Sasuke's anger. Sasuke had tried to get the same two ninja that had taught Naruto a lesson before to do it again, but he couldn't find them. He had tried to find other ninja to do the task, but they had all refused. The Hokage had released the statement that if any ninja should physically harm Naruto, then not only would they be executed, but their names would be stricken from Konoha's records and would be buried in unmarked graves. That had caused more than a little unrest in the village, but the Hokage's word was law. Naruto knew that Sasuke tried to find more people to torture him, so he would insult his fellow student every chance he got. Hinata understood why Naruto did it, but it seemed petty to her. Sasuke tried to defend himself and his pride, but there was really nothing he could do. Naruto was better than him at everything. He had tried to verbally attack Hinata to compensate, but that stopped after the first time. Naruto had snapped his arm like a twig and told him never to insult Hinata-chan. He meant what he said. If Sasuke so much as harmed one hair on her head, then he would kill him along with anyone else that got in his way. Hinata was the only person he could trust fully, and he would protect her for the rest of his natural life. And if he had any say in the matter, his unnatural one as well. His chakra control was coming along well, also thanks to Hinata. Every day she would ditch her guard, Koteme, and help him with it in the 2 hours that he practiced the art. It turns out she was just as crafty as Naruto, with the proper motivation. He had mastered all levels of the leaf exercise as well as the tree walking exercise. Hinata was also improving her chakra control. Not only could she walk up walls, but she was in the process of learning water walking as well. She could stay shin deep without falling in, but only for a minute or so. It was much harder than walking up trees, and, with her 6-year-old reserves, she couldn't do it longer than 5 minutes anyways. Hinata and Naruto also were forced to train on the go. It turns out that Hiashi hadn't informed Ko about the deal with Hinata training with Naruto. He chased them relentlessly, and in order to spend more time with Naruto, they never spent more than an hour at a clearing and never trained in the same place twice. Their record was 4 hours. Naruto's Kenjutsu was coming along swimmingly. He had flew through the basic and adept levels and was working on expert. He had offered to teach Hinata the style, but she had politely refused. The gentle fist required the use of both hands for maximum effectiveness. Hinata's gentle fist was also coming along well. She made up the lost ground in her training and then some. Every other day Naruto would skip either weapons training or Kenjutsu to help her out. He more or less acted like a test dummy. He would dodge and deflect attacks as Hinata would play around with the stances. Naruto had commented that the normal gentle fist style didn't seem to fit her with the quote, "You don't fight like you're all constipated like the rest of your clan." After that, she altered some of the stances to flow more like water instead of the rigid stances. Naruto's Fuinjutsu training defied explanation. He absorbed anything related to the art with vengeance. He flew through the scroll, but the scroll didn't contain any formulas for actual seals. It was more of an introduction, outlining the types of seals and the purpose they served, much to Naruto's disappointment. After it turned out the scroll had served its use, Naruto began to expand his knowledge base of the art in the library and learned about the other types of seals, theories, history, and anything that had anything to do with the art. However, due to his civilian status, there wasn't much on Fuinjutsu that he could access. He knew about other kinds of seals, but he could not make them because he had neither the formula nor the general design for them. The books in the library and in the scrolls only talked about Fuinjutsu users and the history with a dash of the basics. So Naruto did exactly what the books and scrolls warned not to do under any circumstance. He experimented with only the basics. He tried to recreate seals by developing the same formulas by trial and error. The seal he was making the most progress in developing was a gravity seal that he could use in his training, but he was still developing many more. In ninjutsu he also excelled thanks to Hinata. He had mastered Hange and Kawarimi, but he was having extreme trouble with the clone jutsu, even with Hinata's help. She had informed him that he had insanely high chakra levels and that even with her help it may be impossible to mold so little chakra. Naruto had been disheartened to hear that, but, in the end, he had gotten something cooler. He had been practicing the clone jutsu, trying to do the impossible, and summoned 2 clones. After he managed 2 dead ones, Naruto's instincts started to act up again. He had been confused at first when he followed them and ended up with crossed fingers. He had never seen this hand sign before and wondered what it could possibly do. Naruto figured that he should find out and channeled chakra to his hands to perform the jutsu. A poof of smoke later Naruto saw a sickly-looking clone, but not even close to the dead ones he had been producing. I don't feel too good, boss," the clone said, shocking Naruto. "You can talk? Naruto asked in surprise. Normal clones couldn't talk. Did this mean that this clone was different? Moreover, how did his instincts know how to perform this jutsu? It was one thing to have instincts on how to throw a kunai, but it was an entirely different story to have instincts telling you how to perform some unknown jutsu that you've never seen before. His musings were cut short by his clone responding. The weak-looking clone nodded. Yeah, I can, but could you dispel me? I feel like I'm about to spew. The clone exaggerated. Naruto looked slightly panicked. He didn't want to get vomited on. How? He demanded over and over, waving his hands in front of him as if that would stop the clone from vomiting. Just give me a pinch, he said as he blew out his cheeks suggestively. Naruto quickly obliged and the sickly clone disappeared after Naruto gave him a pinch on the shoulder. Then he realized something. He could feel the clone. It was solid. What kind of jutsu did he just use? Naruto was giddy with excitement as he continued to hone the new and mysterious jutsu. At the end of ninjutsu training, he had more or less mastered the jutsu. He found it oddly easier to use it in large numbers. He had gone to school and demonstrated his new technique for Hinata, and she was impressed with it to say the least. She had never heard of solid clones before, and she was only more impressed when she realized that she couldn't tell the difference between the clones and the original. Naruto had yet to figure out the unknown jutsu's special ability yet, but all in good time. Naruto was still at a dead end with the meditation. He was still stuck at the first step and he thought it was finally about time to go ask Gigi for some help, which is why he was on his way to the Hokage Tower right now. Naruto arrived at the tower minutes later, walking right past the receptionist that was telling him that he couldn't just walk in because the Hokage was busy. Yo, Gigi. Naruto called into the office as he walked through the door. Hiruzen was sitting at his desk, several large stacks of paperwork on both sides of him. He rose an eyebrow, curious to why Naruto was giving him a surprise visit. Hello Naruto-kun. What are you doing here? Hiruzen asked, dismissing the angry receptionist with a wave of his hand. I need your help with my training. My meditation won't work, Naruto said, causing Hiruzen's eyebrow to rise further. He had no idea about the mysterious scrolls that made their way into Naruto's home, so he had no idea how far he had come. Meditation? Hiruzen repeated, wondering what kind of training Naruto was doing. Why are you meditating? He asked. Meditation was usually something that higher clan shinobi did, not 6-year-old boys that struggled to sit still. Naruto's brow furrowed in confusion. This entire time he thought it had been Gigi who had provided him with the training. You don't know, but you gave me that training schedule, Naruto exclaimed. If Gigi didn't do it, then who did? Hiruzen puffed on his pipe. No. That was not me Naruto-kun. But why don't you tell me what you have been doing for your training? He asked. Maybe that would give him clues as to who was training Naruto. Naruto nodded. Well, after I got out of the hospital a month ago, I went to my apartment to go grab some training clothes. When I walked in I saw a green scroll on my table and it was full of kika, butt training. I've already mastered the basic and adept levels in everything in the scrolls though, and I've finished the one in Fuinjutsu. Could you get me more scrolls on it? It's my favorite. Anyway, it had stuff full of Fuinjutsu, Kenjutsu, Taijutsu, Jutsus, chakra control, and meditation scrolls and books that I learned from. It also had me doing laps around the village and other exercises, but I've pretty much doubled what it told me to do originally, Naruto said with pride. Hiruzen blinked slowly. By the sounds of it, Naruto had been a little more than busy since their conversation in the hospital. He knew that Naruto had been training quite a bit when he had heard that he had broken Fugaku's second son's arm with ease. He still remembered the fuss that the Uchiha had kicked up over that. And did he say that he had mastered the basic and adept levels in all those things in a month? How is that even possible? The more Hiruzen thought about it, the more he realized that Naruto was likely exaggerating, showing him that he was making progress even though it wasn't really necessary. Oh, that certainly is impressive Naruto-kun. What Kenjutsu and Taijutsu styles are you learning? He asked, thinking that may give him some clue as to who had given Naruto the training. I'm learning the cheetah style and the whirlpool dance style for Taijutsu. For Kenjutsu I'm learning whirlpool of blades, Naruto said proudly. Hiruzen knew in that moment he was going to have a talk with a certain silver-haired, masked ninja. Those were Minato and Kushina's Taijutsu styles and Kushina's Kenjutsu style, and he'd know them anywhere. Impressive, Naruto-kun. I'm very proud that you're taking your training seriously. However, could you possibly bring those scrolls to me when you have a chance? I would like to see how far you've progressed. Hiruzen said with a smile. He wanted to use the scrolls as evidence to get Kakashi talking. He was very stubborn when it came to things he didn't want to talk about, and the god of shinobi had a feeling this would be one of those things. Sure. Naruto dug into the cargo pocket of his shorts and produced the scroll before bringing it to Hiruzen. He opened the scroll and gave it a quick look over, impressed with the thorough training that touched on everything save for genjutsu. He channeled chakra into the seals and went through them as well. He was slightly angry with Kakashi at this point. Who gives a child access to the expert levels of ninja arts when they haven't mastered the basics? Thankfully, he had blocked off the master levels with one of Minato's seals, or he'd be in for the lecture of a lifetime. The Fuinjutsu scroll and the meditation scroll didn't have a seal, but that was okay. They were more focused on introduction than practice. Now can you help me out with my meditation? Naruto asked, hoping to finally get past the first step. Hiruzen nodded. Of course, Naruto-kun. Now, what is the problem? Can't sit still long enough? The Hokage joked and got an eye roll from Naruto. No. Every time I try to enter my mindscape like the scroll tells me to, I get blocked by this weird white wall. I've tried every day for a month to break through it, but nothing works. Do you know what's wrong, Gigi? Naruto asked with a twinge of desperation. If Gigi didn't know how to help him, then he'd never figure it out. Hiruzen frowned. He definitely knew the white wall that Naruto was speaking about, though he had no idea why Naruto would have one. The white wall was an anti-interrogation technique that prevented anyone from entering the bearer's mind, so no one could extract information. Most high-ranking ninja had this, and all Anbu did, since they would know more secrets about the village than lower-ranked shinobi. Yes, I do know what it is, however it will be no easy task to break through. Hiruzen said, thinking that a talented Yamanaka would be able to wear down the wall. They've done it before, and Hiruzen was willing to bet that they could do it again. Plus, the Yamanakas were known for both their interrogation abilities and psychiatry talents. They could check up on Naruto to see how he was coping with what happened. He had been trying to get Naruto to talk about what happened, but met no success. Maybe a trained psychiatrist, interrogator would have better luck. A determined glint shined in Naruto's eye. He didn't care how hard it was. He was going to break down that wall and master meditation as he had everything else. Hiruzen was hit with a blast from the past. Minato would get that exact same look when he would set himself on a course, and neither heaven nor hell could deter him from reaching his goal. It was almost frightening how similar the two were, and yet Naruto had so much of Kushina in him as well. He seemed to have inherited the best of both parents. He smiled at the boy. I'll arrange for you to meet the people that will help you tear down the wall. Do you know the flower shop called Yamanaka's? He asked, thinking that Inoichi really could have thought of a better name for the flower shop that his clan ran. Naruto nodded vigorously. Could you be there around 6 o'clock tomorrow? Hiruzen asked, knowing that was Inoichi's free time. Naruto nodded again and shouted his thanks before leaving to tell Hinata the good news. Anbu, Hiruzen said the moment the door closed. As always, 2 Anbu showed up in the middle of the office. Fetch me Kakashi, he commanded. Soundlessly the 2 Anbu members disappeared. Minutes later 3 Anbu members appeared in his office, though Kakashi was in civilian clothes. He wore his usual mask and matching dark blue shinobi pants and long-sleeved shirt. Hello Hokage-sama, you called? Kakashi said in a sleepy tone. He had just gotten back from a month-long mission in Iwa. The details weren't that important, but he was tired out and was looking forward to sleeping before the Hokage called for him via Anbu. Leave us, Hiruzen commanded his bodyguards, and everyone save the Hokage, and Kakashi left the room. Hiruzen stared at the unconcerned-looking Kakashi. You disobeyed a direct order, Kakashi, Hiruzen growled. There were a few things worse than ninja who disobeyed direct orders in his opinion. Kakashi, still looking sleepy and unconcerned, said, "Oh? What order would that be, Hokage-sama?" he asked in a painfully fake innocent tone. I gave you strict orders that under no circumstances were you to have any contact with Naruto Uzumaki, Hiruzen said, getting annoyed with Kakashi's disrespect. It was one thing to be disrespected by his surrogate grandson, but it was a whole different story to be disrespected by a nearly grown man. That's not the order I remember you giving me, Hokage-sama. If memory serves me, you ordered me never to speak to Naruto, Kakashi said with an eye smile. Hiruzen silently cursed Kakashi and his ability to find a loophole in everything. I would call you leaving a scroll in Naruto's apartment a form of communication, and that's close enough to speaking in my book. Hiruzen said, trying to turn the pressure back on Kakashi. Kakashi's eyes widened in fake surprise. Is that where that went? I've been looking all over for that, he exclaimed half-heartedly, not bothering to put as much effort into lying as he usually did. Kakashi knew it wasn't good for his career for him to sass the Hokage. Or healthy, for that matter. However, in a way he blamed what happened to Naruto on the Hokage. If he had allowed him custody, then none of those things would have happened to Naruto. He would have protected him from those blasted Uchihas, even if it was the last thing he did. It was Hiruzen's turn to give Kakashi a dull stare. I find it hard to believe that a shinobi who made Chunin at the age of 13 had the sudden urge to master the basics of meditation and fuinjutsu. He commented in an annoyed tone. Kakashi chuckled lightly. Well, I did become a genin at 5. Maybe I wanted to brush up on the basics. Naruto said he found this in the center of his table. Care to explain how you managed to drop it there? Gravity is such a fickle thing. Hiruzen sighed loudly as he began to pack his pipe with tobacco. I'm not mad that you gave Naruto a training regimen to follow. If anything, I'm thankful. Naruto wishes to surpass his father, and with what you laid out for him he has a chance. But what I cannot abide is you carelessly giving Naruto access to expert-level techniques without making sure he mastered the basics. You're lucky that you sealed the master rank, or I would have half a mind to strip you of your rank of Anbu. The Hokage threatened, switching tactics. It was true that he was more concerned with Kakashi putting Naruto in danger with the training than he was about him making contact with Naruto. If anything, he expected Kakashi to disobey that order years ago. Kakashi's reaction was not the one Hiruzen had been expecting. He expected to see alarm, regret, fear, anger. All of those were far more understandable than the one he had received. Confusion. Kakashi narrowed his eyes in true puzzlement. Hokage-sama, what are you talking about? Hiruzen also looked slightly confused at Kakashi's odd reaction. Naruto showed up in my office mere minutes ago and showed me scrolls that only had the master levels sealed off, he explained again, honestly baffled with Kakashi's confused tone. No, it can't be possible, Kakashi thought. May I see the scrolls, Hokage-sama? Kakashi asked, abandoning his disrespectful tone. Hiruzen tossed the scroll. He wanted to see where Kakashi was going with this. Kakashi immediately opened the scroll and unsealed the scrolls in them, examining each one. His one visible eye grew wider with each scroll. This can't be possible, he denied. Explain what is going on, Kakashi, Hiruzen commanded. Kakashi looked like he had seen a ghost. The thing is, I did seal off everything but the basics, Kakashi said, large amounts of awe and disbelief in his tone. Hiruzen's brow furrowed in confusion. Then what happened to them? He asked, trying to figure out Kakashi's point. I used a seal that Sensei had developed during the war. Whenever he had a solo mission and we still needed to be trained, he would use this seal on a training exercise scroll. The seal wouldn't let us pass the level we were at on the exercise we were on. If we were working on chakra control, we would be able to read the first chapter, but the second would only be available to us if we fully mastered the first level. Hiruzen's eyes widened as he caught on to what Kakashi was saying, Naruto's explanation of how far he had come ringing around his skull like a bell. Was it possible? Could Naruto truly master that much that fast? Hokage-sama, in case you didn't manage to see through my clever lie, I left this for Naruto. But this was supposed to last several months. A year possibly. To manage to learn this much in a month. Kakashi swallowed. Naruto is a prodigy like no other. He makes me and Itachi look like jokes. He held up a scroll. He's working on tree walking already and he's mastered the basics and introduction to fuinjutsu. He cried. It was one thing to use the Rasengan, but to truly master so much in so little time. Hiruzen puffed on his pipe. Kakashi, this never leaves this room, he said, his tone sharp. Kakashi nodded in agreement. He knew who the Hokage was trying to keep Naruto's talents from. Hi. But what do we tell Otoutu? He's not going to like having to keep his abilities hidden. Especially if they mock him and he could easily wipe the floor with them, Kakashi commented. Hiruzen nodded in agreement. I will have a talk with Naruto-kun after he gets back from the Yamanakas to wear down a mental wall. He looked up at Kakashi. Did you have anything to do with that? He asked, thinking that could really be the only explanation as to why Naruto had an anti-interrogation wall in his mind. However, Kakashi shook his head. I don't know anything about that. Here is inside. If that is all, then you are dismissed, Kakashi. Kakashi nodded and turned to leave the room, but whipped back around when he heard the whistling of a kunai. He turned around just in time for the kunai to miss his leg, but it tore open his pocket. Kakashi looked at the Hokage with a puzzled expression, but Hiruzen just chuckled before he tossed him the green training scroll and a blue one as well. When you're tailing Naruto, be sure not to put those in your pocket. It's a little project I have going on. I've been trying to think up of an effective training regimen for an Uzumaki and a young Hyuga. I would have given it to them myself, but I wanted this project a secret and haven't found the time to deliver it myself, Hiruzen said in a fake tone, causing Kakashi to eye smile. Of course not, Hokage-sama, he said as he left the room, thinking that it really wasn't necessary to ruin his favorite pair of pants. The next day at 6. Naruto walked into the flower shop, thankful that he could get off the crowded streets. He walked slightly warily because he didn't see Gigi in the flower shop. He approached the counter, searching the room for threats but disguised it as him looking at the many flowers before he went up on his tiptoes and rang the bell. Moments later a woman walked through the door. How may I? She looked down at Naruto in a slightly disgusted expression. Help you? She finished. Naruto blinked in surprise that she didn't try to grab him by the ear and toss him out like the other store owners did, but he responded as quickly as he could. The Hokage told me to be here around 6, he stammered out, his anxiety flaring at the prospect of having to talk to someone other than Gigi or Iruka-sensei. The woman's face remained impassive. A moment please, she said as she returned to the back room, and moments later she came back with a fellow blonde man and a 6-year-old Ino. Ino shriveled up in disgust as she saw Naruto. What are you doing here, weirdo? Go away, she yelled at an uncaring Naruto. Inoichi scolded his daughter. Ino, what have I told you about being rude? Apologize right now, he scolded. Ino's parents never told Ino to be mean to Naruto. They never encouraged her to become friends with him or anything, but they never told her to hate Naruto. Ino was one of Naruto's lead bullies anyway. She followed how everyone else mistreated Naruto and used it as a tool to seem cooler. Ino mumbled an, I'm sorry, but by the glare she was giving Naruto, he doubted that she meant it. It didn't matter anyway, Ino's opinion of him meant nothing. There were only 4 opinions that mattered to him: Gigi's, Iruka-sensei's, Hinata's, and his own. Everyone else could fall off a cliff for all he cared. Inoichi smiled apologetically at Naruto. Sorry about that, she sometimes forgets her manners. Well, we have an appointment to keep, so if you would follow me, he said as he walked towards his office. Naruto followed behind him, but he was ready for trouble. He had a kunai tucked in his sleeves, ready to defend himself. They walked into a room that looked like the stereotypical therapist office. Inoichi sat in the chair and offered Naruto the odd-looking couch thing. As Naruto lay down, Inoichi began. So Naruto, I hear that you've been unable to enter your mindscape because of a white wall, he summarized. Hiruzen had already given him the lowdown, but he wanted to confirm it with Naruto. Naruto nodded, wishing he would get on with whatever he was going to do. Inoichi nodded, taking note how tense Naruto looked. Okay then, to break through the wall I'm going to have to touch you. Is that okay? He asked, noticing the alarmed and suspicious look that passed over Naruto's face before he nodded. He also noticed how Naruto's left arm tensed before noticing an odd bulge and had the sneaking suspicion that the boy was armed, but Inoichi paid that no mind. After all, what harm could an untrained child do? Inoichi reached out, placing his hand on the boy's head before activating one of his clan's jutsu and dove into the boy's mind. Inoichi appeared in a vast, white, empty nothing. He looked around with some puzzlement. This was more than some mere wall keeping Naruto or anybody out of his mindscape. This was one of the most advanced walls that he'd ever seen. This was cage level, easily. It was less of a wall but more of a white covering that prevented anyone from seeing anything. Now that begged the question, why would Naruto have such a wall? What could a child possibly know that would warrant a wall so advanced that it would even keep the bearer out of their own mindscape? Inoichi thought about it, Could it have to do with the Kyuubi? Did the Yondaime put this up to protect Naruto from the demon? He wondered. It was the most likely situation. Then Inoichi began to wonder if he should even try to meddle with the wall. If the Yondaime put it up, then he must have had a reason. Even if he did meddle with it, it could take over a month to break it down. He sighed, knowing that in the end it really wasn't his decision. The Hokage had asked him to break down this wall so it wouldn't impede Naruto's training. He sighed again as he flew through hand signs and called out, "Mind Erosion Jutsu," before placing his hand down on the ground. The effect was immediate as the white floors began to turn gray then black. The effect began to spread the longer he kept the jutsu up. This confused Inoichi greatly. Even though the wall was immense and refused entry to everyone, it was fairly easy to break down. When he started the jutsu, he was expecting at best to maybe get an inch or two, but he already had a few feet going at this point. Maybe it's a side effect of the seal that keeps the Kyuubi in, or maybe it wasn't meant to last. Minato used the jutsu once in his life, so he wouldn't know all the side effects of the sealing, he deduced, and continued eroding the wall away. It was hours before Inoichi had ended the jutsu and pulled out of Naruto's mind due to chakra exhaustion. He had made significant progress in eroding the wall. Now instead of seeing nothing but white, you could see the basic outlines of what seemed to be a sewer in milky colors. The sewer, if it was that setting, had worried Inoichi greatly. The mindscape of a person reflected his or her outlook on life. For example, his was a field of flowers and Ino's was Konoha's park. Both showed very healthy mental health and happy dispositions. A sewer reflected quite badly on mental health. Truth be told, Inoichi had only seen such settings in shinobi who were captured by the enemy or the criminally insane. Though, in a way, he wasn't surprised. Naruto was hated by all but a few and had been a victim at the hands of the Uchiha. So he really shouldn't have been surprised at the grim setting. Did it work? Naruto asked. It felt like ages had gone by since the fellow blonde began the weird jutsu on him. At first, he had thought the man was just screwing with him and wasn't helping at all, but a few minutes after he placed his hand on his head, it began to tingle like crazy. It was like his whole head had fallen asleep and was waking up with that sharp pinprick feeling. It lasted for a while, but it had stopped now. Inoichi looked thoughtful. Yes and no. The wall isn't completely gone yet, but it's been severely weakened. It may take 1 or 2 more tries to completely erode it, Inoichi said, giving Naruto a small smile. Naruto's face remained impassive, but on the inside he was jumping for joy. He could finally master meditation now. Inoichi was a bit disturbed by the lack of reaction, but maybe he could get an answer to that as well now that he was starting the second phase of his mission. Now, Naruto, I understand that you were kidnapped a month ago. Do you wish to talk about it? Inoichi asked in a disarming tone that almost always worked. However, Naruto tensed. He had heard tones like that before, and if it didn't come from Jiji or Iruka-sensei, then it always meant trouble for him. No, he answered curtly, hoping that would be the end of the conversation. Inoichi smiled sweetly at him, giving Naruto his best. You can trust me, look before saying, I know that you must have been really scared, but it's okay to talk about it. Even the best ninja gets scared and they talk about it, so there's no need to feel embarrassed. Plus, I'm sworn to secrecy so no one will ever know. Naruto gave him an, are you kidding me? Look before he hopped of the chair. We're done here, he said as he showed himself out. Inoichi blinked in surprise, dumbfounded why that wouldn't work. It always worked with kids. Then he remembered a very important detail. Naruto wasn't like normal children. He would be immune to all of his charms by now. If he wasn't, then he would have likely gone insane from people betraying him so often. He sighed as he pinched his nose in frustration, angry with himself for making such a rookie mistake before he set off to deliver the news to the Hokage. With Naruto walked into his apartment before kicking the door close. His apartment was much cleaner than it had ever been before, which was Hinata's influence. Naruto wanted to impress her and he knew girls didn't like messes, so Naruto had started to clean regularly. He yawned loudly as he headed to his bed. It was a little past 9. The appointment had taken far longer than he had thought. Naruto was a little annoyed that he wouldn't get to practice meditation that night. He had toyed with the idea of staying up late and practicing anyway, but he decided against it. A ninja needed a good night's rest, so he'd leave it for tomorrow. Plus Ino's dad said it may take another session to fully get rid of the wall. He walked towards his bed, but out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a familiar green scroll along with a new blue one. He changed course with excitement as he picked up the new blue scroll. He already knew what the green one had in it. Naruto, I've developed a training schedule for you and Hinata. Inside the storage seals are training supplies such as weights, training weapons, targets, and books that will help you in your shinobi careers. I hope you know that I am incredibly proud of you for training so hard in the past month. However, please do not abuse your power. Not only would it cause a headache for me, but the strong should never pick on the weak. I hope you remember that when you surpass the Yondaime. Sincerely, Hiruzen Sarutobi. Under Gigi's note was an explanation of how to unseal the thing, but he didn't need it. Naruto smiled brightly at reading Hiruzen's note. It was like Gigi had no doubt that he would surpass the Yondaime. He was also immensely happy that Gigi had also made a training schedule for Hinata. They had been more or less making it up as they went along, and in Naruto's opinion, he was gaining more than she was, and that bothered him immensely. However, when he voiced his concerns to Hinata, she had told him that she was happy with her progress, but Naruto still felt he was taking advantage of her. If Naruto knew the truth, he would realize that in many ways she was surpassing his progress, though not in ninja arts. Her self-confidence has been steadily increasing and she was losing some of her timidness. It was likely that she would always be a soft-spoken person, but she could make a stand when she needed to. Naruto opened up the scroll further and unsealed some of the seals, and like Hiruzen said, there were weights and other things. What caught his eye were the variety of books. One was on human anatomy. His guess was that it was for Hinata because she would be able to master the art fully due to her Bukagen. One was the Intro to Chakra Manipulation. Naruto guessed was for him. A training schedule for Hinata, and lastly, and in Naruto's opinion, the best gem of the pile. A few scrolls on the legendary Minato Namikaze, the yellow flash of Kohona. Naruto was absolutely ecstatic that he got to learn more about his idol. Most were about the major role he had played in the Third Shinobi War, but there was one that was about the several jutsus he had created and how he had used them. It was published by Iwa and Kumo to warn their ninja how to best avoid Minato's attacks, but, in the end, it didn't really matter. Naruto was cackling with excitement. Screw sleeping. He was going to read these sweet pieces of literature. With Inoichi and the Hokage. Inoichi stood in the Hokage's office ready to begin his report on Naruto's mental health and the status of the wall. You may begin your report, Inoichi-san, Hiruzen said in a tired tone. It has been a long day. Hi. My session to destroy Naruto's mental wall went incredibly well. The wall was far more advanced than I had anticipated, however it was broken down fairly easily, he began. Oh? Why was it so easily broken down if it was so advanced? Hiruzen asked. Despite being the Hokage and the god of shinobi, he had some trouble fully understanding the matters of mental jutsu. Inoichi seemed to think about it for several seconds. There are a few reasons that I can think of. The first one is that the wall was a side effect of the seal that the Yondaime used, so while it would keep out Naruto and other untrained interrogators, but it couldn't keep out a shinobi of a higher caliber. The second scenario is that the Yondaime put up the wall on purpose so Naruto couldn't have access to the Kyuubi until a certain age, but I just sped up the process, Inoichi explained. Then one more thought struck him. Or, possibly that the Yondaime made the wall so that the Kyuubi couldn't influence Naruto. But due to the fact he was dying, he could only make a wall that blocked on one side. Inoichi said, a sliver of fear making its way into his gut. Had he just screwed up Minato's last act to protect his son? Had he just diminished the one wall that protected Naruto from the demon? With Naruto. It was 2 o'clock in the morning when Naruto decided to put the book down. He was beginning to go cross-eyed from reading for so long. He yawned loudly as he placed his book on the floor beside his bed and turned off the light before going to sleep. Naruto opened his eyes to the surroundings of a sewer, or that's what he thought it was. Everything had a very milky red color and you could only tell where things were because of the faint black outline. Where am I? Naruto asked himself. Did someone throw him in a sewer and he just didn't wake up? Naruto tossed the ridiculous idea away. Not only was he a light sleeper, but the sewer that he was in looked like a poorly drawn sketch. "Come," said a deep but shaky voice, sounding like a radio that was losing signal. Naruto looked around for where the voice was coming from, but it seemed to be coming from everywhere at once. "To me, human," Naruto let out an annoyed sigh. "Where are you?" he yelled, hoping the strange voice would tell him. "Fall, instincts," the voice responded. Naruto cocked his head in confusion. "Follow my instincts? Is that what he's trying to say?" he thought before he started walking. He had no destination planned, he simply followed where his feet thought he should go. He got lost incredibly easily because everything looked the same, but many minutes later, or hours, he began to notice subtle differences in the sewer. The walls had more color in them and the shadows began to look darker instead of their pale, grayish color. Things were more defined, so he stopped bumping into things. Naruto examined the walls with curiosity. Why were they red? Why didn't this sewer stink? All of his questions were answered minutes later when he walked into a large room that looked like it was half the size of Kohona. At the far end, there was a cage that seemed to take up the entire far wall. He continued walking until he was at the center of the room where he felt like he should stop. "Ah, so this is the runt that acts as my jailer. I must say, you're much smaller than I had expected," the voice said behind the cage, two giant red eyes opening and focused on Naruto. Naruto stumbled back a few steps. "Who are you?" he yelled at the source of the voice, confused as to how something so big was locked in a sewer underneath Konoha. "Kukuku. You are very brave or very foolish for addressing in such a way. I am the Kyuubi no Yoko human and you will treat me with respect," the Kyuubi said, a threat implied in his tone. The Kyuubi had been trying to get in contact with its third Jinchuriki but with no success until now. For whatever reason, the white wall that had prevented him from influencing his new jailer had been eroded enough that he could reach out while the child, or was he an adult? All humans looked alike to him. Back to the point, the connection was shaky at first, but now he was in the same room, it was much easier to communicate. Naruto fell back on his backside as he looked up at the Kyuubi with a fearful expression. This was the monster that had killed the Yondaime. The Kyuubi smiled savagely at Naruto, enjoying the fear in Blonde's eyes. What are you doing here? Why aren't you dead?" Naruto demanded. He had been told his entire life that his hero had killed the Kyuubi with his final breath. What was it doing down here in some sewer? "Huh, as if one of you hairless apes could ever have hope of killing me. Your leader made a deal with the Shinigami and I was sealed inside of you," the Kyuubi added reluctantly. In a way, he respected the blonde human for managing to do something so brave as to sell his soul to the king of the dead, but on the other paw he hated him for taking his freedom away again. Naruto was silent for almost 10 minutes, trying to comprehend what the Kyuubi had said. "What?" he yelled in total disbelief. "Did it just say that it was sealed inside of him?" Naruto knew it was possible because he had read about Jinchuriki in the library, but he certainly never thought he was one. Sure, he could see similarities between the way Jinchuriki and he were treated, but who assumes that they have a demon inside of them? "I do not enjoy repeating myself, human. You heard me correctly the first time." Naruto laid on his back with his hands covering his face, muttering denials, but the evidence was there right in front of him telling him it was so. Not only that, but he could remember more than a few times people had called him Kyuubi brat. He had chalked this up to him being born on October 10th, or that the Kyuubi was used as a way to damn something, or him in most cases. "You're sealed inside of me," he muttered into his hands, slowly coming out of his shock. The Kyuubi watched Naruto in idle amusement. He couldn't wait to see the brat's reaction when he fully realized that he was a Jinchuriki. It would be the most amusement he's had in years. "That really fucking sucks," Naruto said as he sat back up. Naruto didn't curse often, but he knew how to, seeing as people often cursed at him. He only did it when the occasion called for it, and this was defiantly one of those occasions. The Kyuubi looked at Naruto with an expression that closely resembled one of a child that was just denied a toy that it had wanted. The Kyuubi was a little pissed that Naruto had denied him entertainment, but in a way he acknowledged that he was dealing with the news fairly well. He remembered when his second jailer had found out he would be sealed in her. She had cried for hours like a little girl, much to his amusement. Mito's seal had allowed him just enough freedom for him to be able to feel the world through her senses. It had been a pain to be discreet enough that she didn't notice, but when he saw the wimp of a jailer, he couldn't help but to be amused. Naruto looked at the Kyuubi with a sullen expression, thinking how different his life could be, but he realized that he may have not been friends with Hinata-chan if it was. So, he was cool if there was a giant freaking demon inside of him as long as Hinata was his friend. The Kyuubi swished his tails in surprise. There was resolve in the boy's eyes that he hadn't seen since the other blonde that had sealed him. This human could prove to be amusing, thought the Kyuubi. Do you not hate me? He asked out of curiosity. He didn't care if Naruto did, but he was wondering why Naruto wasn't screaming, I hate yous. Naruto sighed. Sorta. But I really can't do anything about it, he said, sounding much more mature than a normal 6-year-old. He stood up. Friends? He asked, an offering of peace between the two, but the Kyuubi growled in response. I do not befriend humans, the fox responded curtly. In his opinion, humans were the most vilest of races that did not know the meaning of loyalty. And I don't befriend giant foxes that killed my hero. But you're inside of me, so I guess we should try to get along, Naruto said, using logic that only children were capable of. The Kyuubi blinked in surprise. His past 2 jailers had never really tried to get along with him. Mito had tried to suppress his hatred and Kushina had simply ignored his presence inside of her. However, the Kyuubi's trust was not easily given. I do not befriend humans, runt. But I will give you chances to win my friendship over the years. If you prove to me that you are different than the rest of your race, then I will call you a friend. The Kyuubi narrowed its eyes on Naruto. This does not mean that I won't take the chance to break out of you if one should ever present itself, he warned. Naruto seemed to debate it for several seconds before saying, fair enough, Kyuubi. The Kyuubi swished his tail in thought. I have a name, he said in some annoyance. You would think after 1,000 years people would be able to think up something a little better than nine-tailed fox. What is it? Naruto asked, oblivious to the Kyuubi's inner debate if he should tell Naruto his name. It's Kurama, Kurama said in a threatening tone, daring Naruto to laugh. Naruto cocked his head to the side. You have a weird name, but you got yourself a deal, Kurama. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.